The ultimate version. The next evening, the MIT campus buzzed with excitement as Dr. Anton Steele hosted an exclusive celebration in honor of the competition's participants. The event was held in the large hall on campus. The hall was filled with fancy chandeliers and banners that portrayed the university's history of creativity and innovation. It was full of students, professors, business leaders, and sponsors. Everyone was eager to meet the young star, who had suddenly become the center of attention. Tony showed up a little late, wearing a navy blue suit that made him look both charming and self-assured. Dummy, you, and Elena were safely back at Stark Labs, charging and undergoing routine diagnostics. As he entered, conversations paused, and eyes turned toward him. Tony acknowledged the attention with a casual wave and his trademark smirk before grabbing a drink from a passing server. Dr. Steele approached, a warm smile on his face. Tony, glad you could make it, he said, offering a firm handshake. Wouldn't miss it, Tony replied. Though I hope you didn't throw this just for me. I mean, I know I'm great, but... Steele laughed. The event is for everyone, but let's not pretend you're not the highlight. Well, enjoy the party. Tony, over here, called Rhodey, his best friend and one of the few people who could call him out on his antics. Rhodey was standing near a group of students, laughing at some joke Tony hadn't heard. Tony grinned and joined him. Rhodey, don't tell me you're stealing my spotlight. You mean your ego's spotlight? Rhodey shot back, clapping Tony on the shoulder. Tony chuckled but suddenly winced. A dull ache had been gnawing at the back of his head all day, and now the pain was increasing. He thought it as a lack of sleep. He hadn't rested properly in weeks, pouring every ounce of energy into the competition in Hydra. As the night wore on, the ache intensified further. By the time Professor Steele raised his glass to toast the participants, Tony's vision blurred slightly. He steadied himself on the edge of a nearby table, masking his discomfort with a practiced smirk. Tony, you good? Rhodey asked, his brow furrowing. He waved him off. I'm fine, just a little tired. Rhodey wasn't convinced. You don't look fine, maybe you should sit down. I'm good, Tony insisted, his voice sharper than he intended. He didn't want to admit weakness, not here, not now. An hour later, Tony's condition had worsened. The throbbing in his head felt like a hammer pounding against his skull. Lights seemed too bright, and every sound was too loud. He managed to find a quieter corner, leaning against the wall and rubbing his temples. Rhodey found him again. That's it, you're done for the night. Let's go. He looked worried. He knew how hard Tony pushed himself and now the party with big people gunning for him without giving him a break. Then there were those competitors. He thought maybe Tony was tired. Tony opened his mouth to argue but faltered when a wave of dizziness hit him. He nodded with a sigh. Fine, you win. My head is killing me. Take me back to my room. Rhodey looped an arm around Tony's shoulders and helped him out of the party. By the time they reached Tony's dorm, his steps were unsteady, and his usually sharp wit had dulled. Once inside, Tony collapsed onto the bed, groaning. It's nothing, Rhodey, I'm just overworked. Rhodey crossed his arms, staring him down. You're not just tired, you look like you're about to pass out. Have you eaten anything today? Drunk any water? Yeah, you know I never miss my food and water, Tony muttered, pulling a blanket over himself. Rhodey sighed and went out, returning with a glass of water and some painkillers. Take these, then sleep. If you're not better by tomorrow, I'm dragging you to the hospital. Tony took the pills begrudgingly, swallowing them with a grimace. You're such a mom, Rhodey. Yeah, well, someone has to be, Rhodey shot back. Get some rest. Thanks, man, Tony mumbled, already drifting off. Rhodey waited until he was asleep, then slipped out of the room. There was no way he was leaving Tony alone. As much as his friend liked to think otherwise, he had a habit of making bad decisions and pushing himself too far. But to think he'd hear, thanks, from Tony, well, that was something rare. The next few days passed without incident, but Tony couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The headache from the party had subsided, and he felt fine. Well, better than fine, actually. Yet, there was an undeniable strangeness in the way his mind worked now. The world seemed sharper, more vivid. Numbers, formulas, and ideas danced in his head with a clarity that was almost unsettling. During his usual morning routine, he solved a Rubik's Cube in seconds without even realizing he was doing it. By the time he reached Stark Labs, he'd mentally restructured an entire prototype design that had stumped him for weeks. It wasn't until the evening, as he sat in his dorm scrolling aimlessly through his tablet, that the realization truly hit him. He picked up an MBBS textbook that Rhodey was looking for some reason, and asked Tony to find one for him. Flipping through it, Tony decided to test his newfound abilities. At first, it was out of curiosity. "Let's see what all the fuss is about," he muttered, settling into his chair. Anatomy, biochemistry, pharmacology, topics he'd never touched before, made perfect sense. He breezed through chapters on the endocrine system and surgical techniques, absorbing information as if he'd studied medicine his entire life. Tony paused, staring at the book in disbelief. He closed it, then opened another, a dense text on molecular biology. Again, the information flowed into his mind like water into a glass. There were no barriers, no effort needed. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Slumping back into his chair, Tony ran a hand through his hair, his expression dark. What the hell is happening to me? This wasn't just intelligence, it was something more. His thoughts felt too fast, too clear, as if his brain were running on a completely different frequency. He glanced at the stack of textbooks on his desk and then at the whiteboard in the corner, now filled with equations and schematics he'd scribbled without thinking. "Okay, Stark, think," he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples. "What changed? What's different?" He replayed the last few days in his mind. The competition, the party, the headache. Was this a side effect of exhaustion? A freak reaction to something? Wait a sec. Tony's eyes widened as a wild thought crossed his mind. Ultimate Iron Man. He hadn't thought about those comics in years, not since he'd accepted his new life as Tony Stark. But now, the fragmented recollections, scattered, incomplete, and strange, began to piece themselves together. The Ultimate Iron Man, the version from Earth 1610, had been a genius, just like him. He had been brilliant, driven, and always on the edge of something bigger. But there had been that moment, the brain tumor, a death sentence that couldn't be fixed, no matter how advanced the technology was. In the comics, the tumor had been an unwelcome death sentence that was discovered to be something far more dangerous, an infinity gem, embedded in his brain, transforming him in ways no one could fully comprehend. Tony's hand instinctively went to his forehead. He felt it again now, a strange pulse beneath the skin. He wasn't too sure if it was his imagination or the result of his panicked state. The memory of the tumor, the inoperable one, mixed with the sudden clarity of the knowledge that had flooded his mind. The infinity gem, the maker, it had all come back in a rush. But this wasn't Earth 1610. He was sure about that due to Hank's behavior, his name and the ongoing events. Could it be? Was Hank pretending to be a good guy, or is he abusing Janet behind his fake face? Is he the MCU version or the ultimate version? Ah, damn it. Tony's head spun with the implication. Had he somehow inherited the same fate, the same affliction? But why now, and how had it triggered? He looked at his reflection in the nearby window, his own face staring back at him, young, confident, a little too smug. But now with a glimmer of something unfamiliar in his eyes. A spark of understanding that wasn't his own. The thought of the infinity gem sent a shiver down his spine. Was it possible that, somewhere along the line, this universe's version of Tony Stark had somehow absorbed the same fate as his comic counterpart? Or had it always been there, buried deep within him, waiting to awaken? Was it because he messed with the events of this reality? Too many questions popped up in his mind, but this time he failed to find any answers. Fuck it. Grabbing the jacket, he rushed out of his lab and took a cab straight to the hospital to get a checkup. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 17 advanced chapters, no double billing. 32 comments, 0 vote. Limited time. Come on readers, more power stones. On the way to the hospital, Tony's mind continued working overtime, and then there was that pain. Despite that, he pulled out his tablet and hacked into the hospital's database. It was like a piece of cake for someone who hacked into the Pentagon and Hydra's network to hack into a weak secured network. He found the neurology department and managed to schedule an appointment for the same day with the chief neurologist, Drive. Evelyn Harrington. This was the only way to skip the long wait and the red tape that usually comes with a 16-year-old trying to get medical help without their parents' permission. Tony marked the appointment as urgent but kept the description simple, just mentioning headaches, dizziness, and feeling unwell. Besides that, he ordered Hermes to do a background check on the doctor and find anything that he could use to make a deal in case she asked for parental consent. It didn't take too long for the AI to pull out the data. Now this is some nice shit, he thought reading the data. The cab pulled up to Massachusetts General Hospital, and Tony paid before stepping out, trying to appear composed. He adjusted his jacket and walked quickly into the lobby. At the front desk, the receptionist glanced up from her computer. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked, eyeing him curiously. "Yep, Stark, should be under, Anthony Stark." The receptionist typed in his name. After a moment, her expression shifted to one of surprise. "Dr. Harrington will see you in 10 minutes. Please take a seat." "Thanks," Tony replied, moving to the waiting area. He sat down, tapping his fingers nervously against the armrest. His head still throbbed, and the buzz of activity in the waiting area made it worse. Minutes later, a nurse called his name. He followed her to a consultation room, where Harrington was already reviewing his file. She looked up as he entered. "Anthony Edward Stark." "That's me," he said, forcing a casual tone. Dr. Harrington was in her late 40s, blonde, and she was wearing a glass. "I see here that you've been experiencing headaches and dizziness. How long have these symptoms been occurring?" Tony leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "It started a few days ago. The pain wasn't too bad at first, but now it's pretty intense. Like something's pressing against my skull. It's been hard to concentrate." He didn't mention anything about the sudden burst of clarity in his mind. That wasn't something he wanted anyone investigating. Dr. Harrington took note of his description, her expression neutral but attentive. "Have you had any other symptoms, like nausea, trouble seeing, or trouble speaking?" "No," Tony said quickly. "Just the pain, and sometimes I get a little dizzy. Oh, I might have passed out twice 3 days ago." He left out the parts about his mind moving a million miles a minute and his ability to process information in ways he couldn't explain. That was something he could barely understand himself. Dr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "All right, we'll do a basic neurological exam, and based on the results, we can determine if imaging tests are necessary." Tony agreed, trying to relax as she tested his reflexes and coordination. As she did, his mind kept racing, ticking off calculations and designs in the background. But he kept his face neutral. When the physical tests were complete, Harrington stepped back, evaluating her findings. "Your reflexes and coordination are normal, which is a good sign. However, the pain and dizziness you're describing still require further tests. I'd like to schedule an MRI and possibly a CT scan to rule out any structural issues. You need to call your parents or guardian to obtain consent for the procedure. We will not proceed without it. Understand, Mr. Stark?" Tony pulled out his tab. Hermes has already found out her weakness. Oh, boy, this one is on the next level. But, fuck him. How about we forget about parent consent? You can sign the documents instead, and in return. He placed the tab on the table and slid it over to her. "The proof of your husband fucking the head nurse behind your back or the 2 kids and another wife he's hiding in California." Dr. Harrington's eyes widened, and her cheeks flushed with anger. She picked up the tablet, examining the photos. "I knew it. But, how did you?" "Doesn't matter. A favor for a favor, deal?" He smiled, extending his hand. "Fine," she growled, "but the second the tests are done, you will give me those files. I'm going to tear that bastard apart." "Cool down. I don't want you to get angry and mess up my tests. I promise you that you'll get the files once the tests are done. I can even give you the details of his hidden bank accounts and stocks. So, do your job, find out what's in my head, and you are rich and you can do whatever you want with your husband. Deal?" Dr. Harrington stared at him. She was torn between her outrage and the prospect of gaining wealth and revenge. "Deal," she agreed, shaking his hand. Tony lay on the slide bed, watching the ceiling of the MRI machine as its rhythmic hum filled his ears. It took some time, but the doctor managed to get him a rush order on an MRI. Then there was another scan. The procedure didn't take long, and after it was done, he was escorted back to the consultation room. The doc returned to the consultation room and her expression was telling it all. The results weren't good. She set the folder, containing the results, down on the desk and took a deep breath before speaking. Mr. Stark, the results are back, she began with a grim look. The scans show a mass in your brain. A tumor. It's located deep within the frontal lobe, near critical areas controlling cognitive functions. Tony kept his face calm. How bad is it, Doctor? Harrington paused for a moment as she rechecked the files. The tumor can't be removed with surgery. It's in a spot where operating could cause severe harm to important areas of your brain. We can try radiation and chemotherapy, but because of its size and location, these treatments would probably only slow it down, not get rid of it completely. Early stage? He asked. Yes. Even though it's small at the moment, we believe it will keep growing. As it grows, it will put more pressure on your brain, leading to serious problems with your thinking and memory. Over time, you'll lose the ability to speak and control your movements. Mr. Stark, I'm sorry to tell you this, but... Before she could finish, Tony interrupted. So, I'm going to die, right? How long do I have left? With constant treatment and medicine. Maybe 5 to 6 years, she explained. But that's just an estimate. Some people with this condition survive for years. I know it sounds impossible, but there are stories of patients who were told they had 2 years to live and they made it for 10 or 20. Everyone's case is different. There's always hope, Mr. Stark. Yeah, hope. Tony didn't bother to argue. Thank you, Doc. He opened his tab and forwarded the information to her phone. As promised, here's everything I have. I'll leave the rest of it up to you. Have fun and thanks again. The doctor checked her phone. The files were there, and her husband was completely exposed. But she could care less about him. Right now, she was focused on Tony. Mr. Stark. She stepped toward him. Are you all right? Even she was surprised to see a young boy being so calm after receiving news like that. Anyone would freak out. No worries, Doc. It's just, you know, it was only a matter of time before my brain would kill me. He let out a small laugh. But, I have enough time to do what I want. Thank you. Sigh. She quickly scribbled a prescription for the pain and the dizziness. If the pain or dizziness gets worse, come back immediately. Also, call me anytime if you need anything. She handed him the slip of paper. And it's not my place to intervene with your personal life, but it's better if you inform anyone close and start the treatment as soon as possible. Yeah, will do. Thanks, Doc. Tony left the room and headed to the pharmacy. The pain had eased up, but it was still there. He needed some painkillers to deal with the rest of the day. After getting the prescription filled, he went to a nearby restaurant and decided to grab some burgers and Coke before heading home. He felt tired and a little overwhelmed by the news. Just when he thought he had a new life, death came knocking on his door. He knows the events that might happen in this reality. That tumor is going to become an infinity gem and Reed's maker version would open up his brain while keeping him conscious and he will rip it out, killing him. But he wasn't that desperate. Still, his hands trembled slightly as he ate his lunch. The food tasted bland, and his stomach was a knotted mess. Still, he forced himself to finish it. His body needed the energy. Tony pulled out his phone, debating whether or not to tell anyone about his diagnosis. But he decided to put it back in his pocket. Alright, gotta kill Reed before he can become the maker and kill me. I'm not too familiar with this storyline, so, gotta act fast. He paid for his food and headed back to his dorm. As soon as he got there, he closed the door and locked it. He didn't want any interruptions. He sat at his desk, staring at the array of monitors in front of him. The dull hum of his dorm room's air conditioning was the only sound, underscoring the tension in his mind. He wasn't new to danger or death. It was practically a constant in every universe and he had already experienced it one before. But this wasn't some enemy he could outthink or outmaneuver, this was inside him. A tumor that might turn into an infinity gem if this really was the mishmash universe he feared. Tony clenched his fists, forcing the tremors in his hands to still. He couldn't afford weakness now. The stakes were too high. Hermes, he called out, and his tablet lit up with a soft chime. Find everything you can on Reed Richards. I want his current whereabouts, his research projects, associates, everything. Affirmative, Hermes responded in a neutral tone. Within moments, lines of data began scrolling across the screen. Also, Cross-reference this with any anomalies or unexplainable incidents, superhuman incidents, advanced tech sightings, anything out of place. Hermes processed the command, compiling a report. Tony scanned it, his sharp mind cataloging every detail. Reed Richards existed in this world, a prodigy working on cutting-edge physics and dimensional theories at Empire State University. But only theories, so far. There was no indication he'd ever succeeded in making a device that could break through dimensions. But if it's true, then I can't let him get that far. I need to take him out. Tony's jaw tightened. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 17 advanced chapters, no double billing. 57 comments, 0 vote. Cold calculation. Sunlight came through the blinds in Tony's small dorm room at MIT. Books, plans, and unfinished gadgets were scattered everywhere. It looked the same as always. The quiet sound of his servers and the soft beeps from Hermes, his computer, filled the room as it worked on his latest task. Tony sat at his desk with a cold cup of coffee next to him. His fingers kept tapping on the keyboard, even though the headache he felt made it feel like nails scratching glass. He stopped for a second, rubbing his temples. "Hermes," he said, his voice rough. "Give me an update on Reed Richards' activities." The AI's smooth voice responded instantly. Reed Richards has been spending an increasing amount of time at a private laboratory located on the outskirts of Manhattan. The lab was established 3 months ago under the guise of an independent research facility but is funded through anonymous donors, likely shell corporations tied to advanced tech firms. Tony's lips curled into a humorless smirk. Anonymous donors. Classic Reed. He's always hiding behind someone else's money. There is more, Hermes continued. Surveillance logs indicate irregular energy signatures emanating from the lab during night hours. Patterns match theoretical models for transdimensional energy manipulation. Tony's smirk faded. So, he's closer than I thought. The headache surged, sharp and relentless. He winced, gripping the edge of the desk as pain radiated through his skull. His vision blurred, the screen in front of him dissolving into meaningless patterns. "Hermes, medication reminder," he grunted. "Reminder. You have not yet taken the prescribed painkillers for the day." Tony grabbed the small bottle of pills sitting on the corner of his desk, popped 2 into his mouth, and washed them down with the lukewarm coffee. The bitter taste made him gag, but the relief that followed was worth it. It was now morning, and Tony had an exam to get through. He shoved his tablet and a few notebooks into his bag before heading out the door. The walk to his lecture hall was short, but every step felt like a marathon with the headache pounding away at his senses. His mind wasn't on the exam but on his survival. By noon, Tony was back in his dorm, staring at a detailed blueprint of Reed's lab. Hermes had managed to scrape the schematics from obscure municipal records. It was a fortress of cutting-edge tech and security systems, but it was still a building. It had weaknesses. Tony studied the blueprints for several hours, mapping out potential points of entry, blind spots in the security grid, and areas that could be disabled without triggering the entire system. But what if he hacks into the main system and destroys everything? Maybe a freak accident to kill Reed without physically getting his hands dirty. Hermes can do that. No one will ever know. Tony paced the length of his dorm room, the tension in his shoulders palpable as he mulled over his options. He wasn't a killer, not directly. Engineering solutions, subverting systems, and leveraging technology were his weapons. Taking a life was different. But if Reed Richards became the maker in this world, it wouldn't just be Tony's life at stake, it would be countless others. He stopped pacing and sat down, his hands gripping the edges of his desk. "Hermes, refine the analysis. If I disable Reed's lab, what are the probabilities of collateral damage?" The AI responded almost instantly. "Simulations show that sabotaging the lab from a distance by targeting its power supply and containment systems has a 92% probability of complete destruction of the facility. However, there is a 67% probability of a critical energy discharge causing harm to surrounding areas. Fatalities cannot be ruled out." Tony frowned. That margin for collateral damage was too high. He needed precision, not chaos. He ran a hand through his hair, the throbbing in his head making it hard to focus. "All right, let's scale it back. Find me a way to isolate the energy systems without blowing the place sky high." Hermes processed for a moment before speaking. Solution: disruption of the primary containment field. The lab's energy manipulations rely on an uninterruptible power supply from a custom-built quantum generator. Disabling the generator would cease all transdimensional experiments without the risk of a catastrophic chain reaction. This requires physical access to the generator. Tony's eyes narrowed as he considered the risk. Breaking into the lab wasn't ideal, but it was starting to feel unavoidable. If he wanted precision, he'd have to do it himself. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the schematic on his screen. The generator was housed in the sub-basement, heavily shielded from external interference. It was Reed's pride and joy, no doubt. Hermes, start designing a disruption device. Something portable that can emit an EMP strong enough to temporarily disable the generator. Make it compact and fast-acting. Acknowledged, Hermes replied. The screen filled with schematics as the AI began designing the device. Meanwhile, Tony began to design a mini robot the size of his palm. The robot would carry the EMP disruptor into the lab and plant it near the generator. 1 month later. The past month had been a whirlwind of preparation. Between balancing his classes, keeping up appearances, and evading the growing pain in his head, Tony had poured every spare moment into his plan. If Reed Richards was on the cusp of a breakthrough that could lead to disaster, Tony needed to act before it was too late. Hermes's voice broke through the hum of machinery. Disruption device prototype completed. Ready for testing. Tony stood at a central workbench, a holographic blueprint of the EMP disruptor hovering in front of him. The device was compact and small enough to fit in his hand, yet powerful enough to overload Reed's custom quantum generator. Beside it sat a sleek, spider-like robot, designed to infiltrate the lab and deliver the disruptor to its target. Tony picked up the disruptor, examining it closely. Nice work, Hermes. What's the estimated success rate for deployment? Simulations indicate an 87% probability of successful delivery and activation. The remaining 13% accounts for unforeseen variables, including human intervention or mechanical failure. Tony frowned. Not perfect, but it'll have to do. Let's run a live test. Cue up the simulation environment. The lab transformed as holographic walls rose around him, creating a virtual replica of Reed's lab. Tony activated the spider bot, watching as it scurried across the floor, navigating the holographic obstacles with precision. The bot reached the simulated generator, attached the disruptor, and activated it with a soft click. A pulse of light spread through the room, signaling a successful EMP discharge. Tony smiled faintly. Good. Now, let's make it smarter. Add adaptive algorithms so it can reroute if it encounters unexpected resistance. I want it thinking on its feet, or legs, in this case. Acknowledged, Hermes replied, beginning the reprogramming process. Tony sank into a nearby chair, rubbing his temples. The headaches had worsened over the past month, and the painkillers barely took the edge off anymore. He knew the tumor was growing, pressing against his brain, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. Not now. Progress on Richards? He asked. Hermes displayed a report on the nearest holographic screen. Reed Richards' lab has increased its activity. Energy signatures indicate he is nearing a breakthrough in his experiments. Estimated timeline for success: 2 weeks. Tony's jaw tightened. Then we move tomorrow night. I'm not giving him 2 weeks. The next night, Tony crouched on a rooftop overlooking Reed's lab, the spider bot in his hand and the EMP disruptor secured in its payload. The cold night air bit at his skin, but he barely noticed. His focus was on the task ahead. Through a pair of high-tech binoculars, he observed the lab's security systems. Reed had spared no expense. Cameras covered every angle, motion detectors swept the grounds, and drones patrolled the perimeter. It was impressive but not impregnable. Hermes, activate drone hacking protocol, Tony whispered. Fucker got advanced drones. Ha, but the security program is a joke. The tablet strapped to his arm displayed a live feed as Hermes took control of the patrolling drones. One by one, they froze mid-air, their systems overridden. Tony smiled. Step 1. Complete. Step 2. Infiltration. He set the spider bot on the roof's edge. All right, little guy, show me what you've got. The bot came to life, its 8 legs moving with mechanical precision as it descended the side of the building. Through its onboard camera, Tony watched as it approached a vent near the lab's main power conduit. The bot slipped inside, navigating the ducts with ease. Inside the lab, the bot moved swiftly, avoiding detection as it approached the generator in the sub-basement. Tony's heart pounded as the bot reached its destination. The quantum generator was an imposing machine, humming with barely contained energy. "Deploy the disruptor," Tony commanded. The bot extended an arm, attaching the EMP device to the generator. A countdown appeared on Tony's screen, 30 seconds to activation. Suddenly, alarms blared. The lab's security systems detected the bot's presence. Tony cursed under his breath. Hermes, what triggered it? Unknown. Security override detected. Likely manual intervention. On the screen, Tony saw Reed Richards entering the room. He looked younger than Tony had expected, his face lit with curiosity rather than fear. Reed approached the generator, his eyes narrowing as he spotted the spider bot. "What the hell is this?" Reed muttered, reaching for the bot. "Activate EMP, now!" Tony barked. The bot emitted a high-pitched whine as the EMP device activated. A burst of energy rippled through the room, cutting power to the generator and plunging the lab into darkness. Reed stumbled back, shielding his eyes from the sudden flash. Tony didn't wait to see the aftermath. "Hermes, quick, take control and crawl up to Reed's head and self-destruct." He watched as the spider bot surged forward in the darkness, its 8 legs glinting in the faint emergency lights that flickered on. Hermes, adaptive algorithms took over, guiding the bot with precision. Reed Richards, still disoriented by the EMP blast, barely had time to react. The bot leapt onto Reed's shoulder, its legs gripping tightly as it crawled toward his head. Panic flashed in Reed's eyes as he swatted at the mechanical invader, but his movements were sluggish, his body still reeling from the electromagnetic shockwave, and the metal legs of the bot pierced through his skin, sitting on his head. The bot's metallic legs clamped down with brutal efficiency, anchoring itself atop Reed's head. Sparks danced from its compact frame, a harbinger of the destructive power it held within. Reed flailed, his arms clawing at the invasive machine as panic took hold. "Get off me!" Reed gasped, his voice cracking with desperation. But it was too late. "Hermes," Tony whispered coldly, his voice steady despite the pounding in his head. "Do it. Make it clean." Command acknowledged, the AI responded, its tone devoid of emotion. The countdown was instant, the mechanism precise. A high-pitched whine crescendoed as the bot discharged its payload, a focused burst of energy that overloaded Reed's neural pathways, silencing his thoughts and body in one swift, catastrophic pulse. Reed crumpled to the ground, his body lifeless before it hit the polished floor. The spider bot sparked and twitched, its own systems fried by the controlled detonation. Smoke curled from its frame, the only evidence of the lethal encounter. Tony exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the edge of the rooftop as he stared at the live feed on his tablet. For a moment, the room on the screen was still. Only the faint hum of backup power systems and the quiet crackle of short circuits broke the silence. "Hermes, status report," Tony demanded, his voice low and rough. "Primary target neutralized. No external breaches detected. Lab systems remain non-functional. Local authorities have not been alerted." Tony nodded, his expression unreadable. He leaned back against the rooftop wall, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "Copy the data from the main server. Erase the footage," he ordered. "Scrub everything. No trace. Then blow up the place." Affirmative. As Hermes worked, Tony closed his eyes, the throbbing pain in his skull momentarily eclipsed by the enormity of what he had done. Reed Richards was gone, his brilliant mind extinguished. The potential threat he posed, one that could have unraveled dimensions, had been averted. Yet, the air around Tony felt heavier, the victory hollow. Was it the right choice? Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 17 advanced chapters, no double billing. 55 comments 0 vote. Altered events. Tony Stark stood at the edge of the MIT campus, his 2 diplomas folded in a smooth leather case tucked under his arm. The sun had begun to set, stretching long shadows across the stone paths where he had strolled many times before. At 17, he was even younger than all of his fellow students, but his achievements far surpassed theirs. He had graduated with degrees in physics and engineering, already had patents that brought him a steady income, and was recognized as both supremely intelligent and a little crazy. And then, there was the other legacy. The one he never spoke about. Tony tightened his bag strap and walked to Rhodey, who stood a few feet away. He pulled out an envelope from his pocket and handed it over to Rhodey. "What's this?" Rhodey asked, furrowing his brow as he took it. He opened it and pulled out the paper, revealing a check for $50,000. His eyes went wide as he looked at Tony. He was shocked and couldn't believe that someone would just casually give him a check for that amount. It was too big of a sum. "What the hell, man? Relax, it's legit," Tony said, smirking. "Prize money from the robotics competition. You know, the one where I basically humiliated every other team on the planet. I never used it. Figured it's time it went somewhere worthwhile." Rhodey shook his head, pushing the check back toward Tony. "No way, I can't take this. That's your money, Tony. You earned it." Tony crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. "Rhodey, you're going to take it. And you're going to fulfill that dream of yours, military academy, right? Then use the rest to help your parents. I know things have been rough since your dad's accident. This will help." Rhodey's jaw tightened. "That's not the point. My family doesn't need charity, and neither do I." Tony's smirk faded, replaced by a rare moment of sincerity. "It's not charity. It's a little bribe from me so that when you reach your goal, you can help me out whenever I do something stupid." Rhodey gave him that look. Tony sighed. "Look, I don't do this kind of thing, ever, but you're the best damn person I know. You've stood by me when I didn't deserve it. You've got this whole honor and duty thing I'll never understand, but the world needs people like you. So, take the damn check before I hack into your bank account and deposit it myself." Rhodey stared at him, conflicted, before finally sighing and putting the check into his pocket. "You're impossible, you know that." "Yeah, I've heard that once or twice," Tony said with a grin. "But seriously, Rhodes, don't waste this. Go do your thing. Be the hero everyone already knows you are." Rhodey chuckled softly, shaking his head. "All right, Tony, I'll take it, but you'd better promise me one thing." "What's that?" "Take care of yourself. And maybe, just maybe, try not to burn the world down in the process." Tony gave him a mock salute. Scout's honor. The two friends exchanged a firm handshake that quickly turned into a bro hug. As they pulled apart, Tony felt a pang of something unfamiliar. Gratitude, regret, he wasn't sure, but it was quickly buried under his usual bravado. "I'm heading out tonight," Tony said as checked his wristwatch. It was time to pack up all his properties from the makeshift lab of his. The truck should already be there. Rhodey nodded, his expression serious. "Good luck, man, and if you ever need anything, you know where to find me." Tony gave him a parting wave before striding toward the waiting car. Stark Mansion. The tall iron gates opened with a little, mechanical sound, revealing the long driveway flanked by tall cypress trees. The driver drove the car onto the gravel and parked near the entrance to the mansion. Tony stepped out. It had been 3 years since he had left home, living in campus housing while attending MIT. But everything looks the same, down to the last detail. Jarvis, the family butler, was waiting for him at the door. He was in his usual crisp black suit. "Master Anthony," he said with a warm smile, "welcome home." "Jarvis," Tony greeted, grinning at the familiar face. "How have you been?" "Oh, I can't complain, sir. And you look like a grown man now. I suppose that's what happens when you're not around your old guardians." Tony chuckled. "What about Dad? Is he home?" "Your father is currently occupied at Stark Industries," Jarvis said as they walked inside. "There was an urgent board meeting that required his attention." Tony smirked faintly. Of course there was. Before Jarvis could respond, a sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway. Tony turned, just in time to see his mother rushing toward him. Maria Stark's face lit up with unrestrained joy as she opened her arms wide. "Tony," she exclaimed, pulling him into a tight embrace. "Oh, my darling boy." Tony stiffened at first. Physical affection wasn't exactly his forte, but eventually, he relaxed and hugged her back. "Hey, Mom." Maria pulled back just enough to study his face, her hands gently cupping his cheeks. "Look at you, you're all grown up. I swear, you left a boy, and now you're a man." He shrugged with a wry smile. "What can I say? Time flies when you're drowning in late nights and coffee." Her expression softened, though concern lingered in her eyes. "You look tired, Tony. Have you been taking care of yourself?" "Define taking care," he replied lightly, sidestepping the question. I'm here, aren't I? Maria sighed but didn't press the issue. Instead, she took his arm and led him toward the living room. Come, sit down. I want to hear everything, what you've been up to, how your classes went, everything. Jarvis took his bags back to his room. 2 degrees. Haha, you really outdid yourself, Tony, Maria said proudly, sipping her tea as she listened to Tony talk about MIT. Your father is so proud. He wanted to pick you up from the campus himself, but he received an emergency call from the company. He asked me to apologize for not being here. I understand. He's busy, and I don't mind. But enough about me. How are you doing? Tony asked, trying to change the topic. How's Dad been? Oh, I'm fine. Just a few charity events here and there, Maria said dismissively, as if they were nothing. And Howard is, well, you know how he is. He isn't drinking again, is he? Tony asked with concern in his eyes. Maria sighed. No, thank goodness. It has been 2 years since his last slip. But he's still working far too much. I tell him he should take a break, but he never listens. I guess some things never change. She smiled at him, reaching over to place her hand on top of his. And you, mister, go to your room and sleep, she said, noticing the black circles under his eyes and his exhausted expression. But Mom, I'm not sleepy yet, Tony whined like a kid. I need to arrange my lab again. Maria raised an eyebrow and gave him a stern look. Do not argue with your mother. I'll wake you up at dinner. He held up his hands in surrender. All right, I'll go to bed. She patted his hand gently. That's my boy. Now, off you go. You need your rest. Tony got up from the couch and leaned down to kiss Maria on the cheek. Good night, Mom. Good night, dear. With a smile and a nod to Jarvis, Tony headed upstairs to his room. Morning. The morning sun came through the gaps in the curtains, followed by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and warm croissants wafted through the air from the kitchen and gently woke him up. Tony groaned and rolled over, burying his face into the pillow. He didn't have a headache today but felt too lazy to move. It had been quite long since he slept this late. He looked at the table clock, sighed. It was already 8 a.m. Sir, Jarvis's voice came from outside the door, followed by a light knock. Your mother requested I wake you for breakfast. She insisted, in fact. Tony grumbled but pushed himself up from bed. His room was mostly bare, save for the essential furniture and a few scattered pieces of clothing. Fine, he muttered as he sat up. Tell her I'm coming. As you wish, sir. Jarvis turned and left. He yawned and stretched before getting out of bed. He took his robe and dragged his feet toward the bathroom to wash up before heading downstairs. Downstairs, Maria sat at the grand dining table. The table was set with an array of breakfast foods, eggs, toast, bacon, and fresh fruit. Howard's seat, as expected, was empty. And the TV was on. Good morning, sweetheart, Maria greeted, her face lighting up as Tony shuffled into the room. Morning, Mom, Tony mumbled, grabbing a piece of toast and flopping into a chair. Did you sleep well? As well as I ever do, he replied, taking a bite. Maria gave him a concerned look but didn't push. Instead, she gestured to the television mounted on the wall. You should watch this. It's all over the news. Tony glanced at the screen as the anchorman's voice cut through the serene breakfast atmosphere. In a shocking turn of events, the United States narrowly avoided disaster late last night. Soviet missiles, believed to be part of a Cold War escalation, were launched in the direction of major U.S. cities. However, in an unprecedented twist, the missiles' trajectories were altered mid-flight. Tony continued eating. So, Hank did it. Janet should be safe. Phew, another event altered. Now, hope it doesn't come to bite me in the ass. The screen showed a map of the missile paths. Red arcs represented their initial trajectories toward Washington, D.C., New York City, and Los Angeles. Midway, the paths abruptly veered, redirecting toward remote locations marked with black dots. These black dots, the reporter continued, represent known bases of terrorist organizations. According to military sources, these facilities were utterly destroyed in the strikes. Notably, one of the largest targets, thought to be a Hydra compound, was obliterated in what experts are calling a precision strike on a massive scale. Tony's brow furrowed as he tried to put on his act. Hydra, as in the Nazi offshoot? I thought they were long gone. Maria set her cup down, her expression grave. That's what they've always wanted us to believe. The reporter continued, while initial analysis suggested sabotage, experts are now speculating that the missile guidance systems were hacked. The level of sophistication required to alter such systems remotely has left military analysts stunned. But whoever did that, saved millions of lives in just one night. It's truly a miracle. If you are watching, then thank you, hero. Tony felt like facepalming. Hero. Seriously. He shook his head as he took another bite of his toast. Maria turned to her son, her gaze softening. It's all over the news. Everyone is praising this mysterious person. And who knows, maybe there really is a superhero out there. He forced a smile, swallowing his food before saying, maybe. The screen shifted to a press conference. A general stood behind a podium, flanked by somber officials. We are conducting a full investigation, he said, his voice firm. This level of cyber warfare is unprecedented, and we are exploring all possibilities. Tony leaned back in his chair, hacking Soviet missiles. That's insane. Whoever did this must have had access to some serious tech. Maria's eyes remained on the screen, her hand gripping her teacup tightly. What do you think, Tony? Could someone really do that? He shrugged, trying to play it cool. Theoretically, sure, but it would take a genius. Or a lunatic, or both. Maria narrowed her eyes as she looked at him. You know something? Tony smirked. I plead the fifth. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 16 advanced chapters, no double billing. Next chapter on Sunday night. Tomorrow break. Excalibur_X creators thoughts. 25 comments 0 vote. Divide and obliterate. After breakfast, Tony shifted his focus to the task at hand. Set up his new lab again. He spent the entire day tinkering and rearranging everything in the basement. It was almost noon when he finally finished. He stretched his arms, satisfied with the result. His new lab looks clean and ready for action. His next plan was to prevent his parents' death. Now that he knows the Ultimate and MCU realities are merged together, he had to improvise his plans. There was only 1 week left until Howard and Maria's assassination date. It could be either Hydra or the Mandarin Industries. And there might be a possibility that it might be both. Instead of getting hyper, he remained calm and collected, focusing on what he could do now. Tony wanted to make an armor, but 1 week was too short, and then there was the arc reactor. With whatever resources he had access to, it wouldn't be hard to create a suit, but there were too many eyes around him. Then there was the matter of testing. He couldn't exactly just get up and fly whenever he wanted. Right now, he sat down before his computer, Hermes. Hack into Mandarin Industries. Over the years, Tony upgraded his AI to be the best one. The AI code was so complex that no one could hack into it or trace it back, and there was no system that Hermes couldn't infiltrate. It can bypass any security system. Not to mention the backdoor access to Pentagon and SHIELD servers. Yes, sir, a holographic display of blue orb appeared, floating above the table. The AI hacked into the database of Mandarin Industries and began to gather all the data available. Tony didn't want to just interfere with their operation. He wanted to know every single thing about them without raising any red flags. All right, Mandarin, Tony muttered. Let's see what you're hiding. The screen was filled with Mandarin International's encrypted servers. The Ten Rings organization had grown beyond its historical roots, adapting into a shadowy corporate empire. The AI bypassed multiple firewalls and finally gained control of the company's mainframe. Sir, Hermes said, I've accessed the mainframe. Mandarin International files. Project Iron Blade. A covert operation targeting key industrial leaders across the globe. Howard Stark's name was flagged under the primary threats category, listed alongside Stark Industries' most valuable patents. Assassination window. December 16, 1987. Confirmed operational. Operatives assigned. Classified. Tony clenched his jaw. So, they're planning to take out Dad in a week. He opened another file labeled Sleeper Hydra Assets, which revealed a disturbing overlap. Mandarin International had been collaborating with remnants of Hydra to strengthen their global operations. The partnership seemed tentative but deadly. They covers each other's asses, increasing espionage capabilities. Hydra and Mandarin, working together. That's new. Tony frowned. Guess everyone's teaming up these days. He realized that intervening would require finesse. Mandarin's assassins were notorious for their precision, and any overt action would alert them. Moreover, if Hydra's operatives were involved, they could retaliate with overwhelming force. Although his intervention before has weakened Hydra's power, they still have a large network. He leaned back, running a hand through his hair. He had 1 week to outmaneuver 2 of the deadliest organizations in the world. His parents' lives and perhaps the future of Stark Industries depended on it. Arg! The headache came back. Tony took out the bottle from his pocket and swallowed a pill, waiting for it to work. After a few minutes, he sighed in relief as his headache slowly faded away. He rubbed his forehead. Well, I guess, I'll go all out. Tony knew he couldn't go out and fight or create armor without his father asking him dozens of questions. He wanted to ask Hank Pym for the favor he owned but decided not to because if something goes wrong and Pym dies, the future will change drastically and he'll lose his chance to get his hands on the Pym particles formula that only Hank knows. So, he was going to use the best thing he has: hacking. In a world where technology is evolving every day and big industries are using more technology, hacking into them would be like stealing from a kid's toy box. I am so gonna fuck you both up that you wouldn't even know what the hell is going on after I am done with you all, Tony muttered darkly. But his stomach suddenly rumbled and he was reminded that he hadn't eaten anything since morning. He looked at the watch. Ah, crap, it was already past 5 and he missed lunch. With a heavy sigh, he got up from the chair and went upstairs. Ah, Mom, you cooked my favorite. Tony smiled as he saw a steaming lasagna on the table. Maria smiled back. Come, sit down. Tony sat down and started eating his food, savoring the taste of homemade lasagna. How did you know I would come up right now? He asked his mother as he ate. I just know, Maria said as she looked at him with a knowing smile. How was the lab? Is it to your liking? It's perfect. I'll need to tweak some things here and there but it's just what I needed, Tony replied. Maria nodded. That's good to hear. Are you working on anything in particular? Just some blueprints for a prototype robot I'm thinking of, Tony replied casually. Nothing too fancy. Maria hummed. I saw your 3 robots, they look nice. Oh, Dummy and you. They're my assistants. Tony chuckled. They're a bit clumsy, but they help me out in the lab. And the humanoid one is Elena. Elena, she asked, looking at her with curiosity. Don't tell me. Ah, hell no, that's not it. Don't even think about it. It's not like that. Elena, aka, Emotional Learning and Enhanced Neural Algorithm. Elena is an AI and that humanoid robot is the body she is using. Oh, that's a relief, Maria said as she breathed a sigh of relief. I thought you made a robot girlfriend or something. Mom, what? She asked innocently. I'm just worried about you, dear. You've been all busy with only work and experiments. Do you even have a girlfriend? Did anyone catch your eye at MIT? Forget that, do you even have friends? Tony rolled his eyes. I don't have time for romance. There's too much to do. And don't worry, I'm fine. I have plenty of friends at MIT. How many? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Sigh, he scratched the back of his head. Fine, one friend, Rhodey. You remember him, right? I told you about him last month. Yeah, I remember. And I meant other than him. I mean, come on, Tony. You can't always stay a loner. You need to go out and meet new people and make new friends. Don't be so cold and aloof. Mom, I'm fine. Besides, I have my whole life ahead. But right now, I am just going to focus on work and improving myself. I don't have time for girls or any distractions. And who knows, maybe I'll find the right one when I am old and gray. Tony smiled. Maria sighed and said, you are impossible. Always ready with excuses. But fine, do what you want. Just know that I don't want you to become what your father was in the past. Too much work, stress, and alcohol, and you already know the yelling. So, take a breather when you can and try to enjoy life a little bit out of your own world. Tony nodded. He knew that Maria was worried about his future and the path he was going to take. Not to worry, Mom. I'll keep it in mind, he said with a smile. Night. Later that night, Tony returned to his lab, recharged and ready to execute his plan. His parents were safe upstairs, unaware of the storm he was about to unleash. He sat before his computer, the holographic displays illuminating the dimly lit basement. Hermes, time to go full throttle. We're hitting Hydra and Mandarin where it hurts the most. Understood, sir, Hermes replied, its voice calm yet purposeful. Tony cracked his knuckles and leaned forward. First target, Hydra. Let's expose their dirty laundry. Hermes swiftly infiltrated Hydra's encrypted servers. Over the years, Tony had developed unique algorithms capable of penetrating even the most sophisticated firewalls. Hydra's extensive network began unraveling before his eyes. Secret bases, covert operations, and high-ranking operatives' identities were now at his disposal. Focus on their new bases and upcoming plans. Make it look like Mandarin leaked the information to governments worldwide, Tony instructed. One by one, Hydra's clandestine facilities were exposed to intelligence agencies across the globe. Locations of hidden bases in Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and South America were sent anonymously to MI6, the CIA, and every other available government network. To add fuel to the fire, Hermes fabricated evidence suggesting that Mandarin International had betrayed Hydra, feeding these agencies the information. Let them tear each other apart, Tony muttered, smirking. Next, he turned his attention to Mandarin International. Hermes hacked into their financial systems, uncovering widespread tax evasion, offshore accounts, and funds funneled into illegal activities. Tony redirected damning evidence to international regulatory bodies, including the IRS and Interpol. Let's make their tax problems everyone's business, Tony smirked. The media was next. Hermes anonymously leaked a cache of financial documents to trusted journalists, painting a vivid picture of Mandarin's corruption. The headlines were already writing themselves. Mandarin International, corporate empire or criminal syndicate. Now, for a little extra chaos, Tony said, his eyes gleaming. Hire the best foreign assassins. Make it look like Mandarin's internal factions are eating each other alive. Using anonymous accounts, he contacted mercenaries from Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia. They work for money, so Tony rerouted Mandarin's money to them. Within hours, coordinated strikes took out key Mandarin operatives, sowing paranoia and mistrust within their ranks. By dawn, the world was in chaos. News channels buzzed with reports of exposed Hydra bases, Mandarin's financial scandals, and escalating violence within the Ten Rings organization. In Eastern Europe, Hydra agents were raiding suspected Mandarin facilities, convinced of their betrayal. Mandarin's forces retaliated, believing Hydra had orchestrated the leaks and assassinations. The two shadowy organizations were now locked in a covert war, their resources stretched thin. Tony watched the chaos unfold on multiple screens, sipping a cup of coffee. His smirk was one of satisfaction. Hermes, monitor the fallout. I want to make sure this keeps them too busy to even think about targeting Dad. Of course, sir. Preliminary reports indicate the destabilization has exceeded projected outcomes. Hydra and Mandarin are now prioritizing each other as threats. Tony leaned back, rubbing his temples. Good, but keep digging. If either of them tries to regroup, I want to be 10 steps ahead. Oh, put a big bounty on Mandarin while you're at it. Make sure it comes from the east. Yes, sir, Hermes replied. Tony sighed, glancing at the time. It's 6 a.m. I need a nap. He stood up, stretching his arms. Then he walked over to the couch and collapsed onto it, letting sleep claim him. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 16 advanced chapters, no double billing. -- 51 comments 0 vote. Mandarin. The atmosphere in the modern, tall office of Mandarin International's main building was filled with tension. Zhang Wei, who called himself the Mandarin, stood near the large window that showed a view of Shanghai's vast city. He wasn't looking at the scenery. His sharp eyes stared at the glass, his face showing a frown and a tight jaw. Behind him, his close assistant stood in a half-circle, moving uneasily and avoiding looking at their leader. The stress in the room was easy to feel. How? The Mandarin's voice, calm but cold as ice, cut through the oppressive silence. How did this happen? One of the lieutenants, Lin, a wiry man with hawkish eyes, stepped forward hesitantly. Sir, the leaks started approximately 6 hours ago. First, our offshore accounts, Interpol and the IRS have flagged over 70% of our assets. Frozen, seized, the financial division is in shambles. Zhang turned sharply, his piercing gaze locking onto Lin. 70%? You're telling me we've lost billions overnight? Lin nodded reluctantly. Yes, sir. And the hits keep coming. Journalists worldwide are publishing damning exposés, and our shell corporations are being dismantled as we speak. We're hemorrhaging money. The Mandarin's eyes narrowed. This isn't just a random attack. Someone coordinated this. Someone with resources. Another lieutenant, Mei Ling, chimed in, her voice trembling slightly. Sir, it's worse than that. Our assassination network is compromised. Nearly half of our top operatives are either dead or have gone dark in the past 12 hours. Eastern European and Southeast Asian mercenaries took out our teams in Kiev, Jakarta, and Dubai. Zhang's fists clenched tightly. The 10 Rings had been his life's work, a sprawling network of elite assassins and shadow operatives that took years to cultivate. Each loss was a blow to his empire, and he didn't believe in coincidences. Someone was targeting him. And Hydra? Zhang asked, his voice low and dangerous. Mei Ling exchanged a glance with Lin before responding. Hydra's bases have been exposed to global intelligence agencies. They believe we're responsible. Retaliation has already begun. They attacked 2 of our key facilities in Istanbul and Casablanca. Casualties are in the hundreds. Zhang let out a sharp breath, his mind racing. This was no small act of sabotage. This was war, and it had been unleashed with surgical precision. His lips curled into a snarl. Hydra is a dog that bites when cornered. But I do not believe they are behind this. They are too blunt, too predictable. He paced back to his desk, his mind analyzing every angle. Who could have done this? The leaks, the assassinations, the attacks. It was a symphony of chaos, orchestrated by someone who knew both his organization and Hydra well enough to pit them against each other. Who benefits from this? He murmured, more to himself than his subordinates. Lin stepped forward again. Sir, we're investigating possible suspects. Rival organizations, perhaps a state-sponsored effort. Fool, Zhang snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. This isn't a rival syndicate or some government agency. This is personal. Whoever did this wants us to suffer. The room fell silent, his words hanging in the air like a heavy fog. Zhang's mind raced. If this was personal, there weren't many with the capability or the audacity to attack him on this scale. Bring me the full list of leaks and known operatives compromised, Zhang ordered. And increase security at all remaining facilities. Triple it. I want every loose end tied up, every informant interrogated. Mei Ling hesitated before speaking. Sir, there's one more issue. Zhang turned to her, his glare enough to make her flinch. What now? Someone has placed a bounty on you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. A massive one. It's being circulated through Eastern criminal networks. The message was traced back to an anonymous source, but it appears to be coming from within our own accounts. Zhang froze, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the distant hum of the city below. A bounty, he repeated, his voice calm but laced with venom. Using my own money. Mei Ling nodded, her eyes downcast. Yes, sir. Zhang inhaled deeply, the muscles in his neck tightening as he fought to contain his fury. This is not an attack. This is humiliation. He turned to Lin. Find the source of the bounty. Find out who accessed our accounts and leaked the funds. And when you find them, bring me their head. Yes, sir, Lin replied quickly, bowing slightly before retreating. The Mandarin looked back out the window, his thoughts filled with anger and plans. This was a clear attack on his empire, a well-thought-out effort to destroy everything he had created. But even more, it was a personal insult. Whoever was behind this wanted him to suffer, to lose face, to watch his empire crumble. But Zhang Wei was not a man who accepted defeat. He had built the 10 Rings from nothing, clawing his way to the top through sheer force of will and ruthless efficiency. He would not let some faceless enemy destroy him. Mei Ling, he said, his voice low but commanding. Yes, sir. Contact our remaining assets. I want every available operative hunting down leads. Every hacker, every informant, every mercenary. I don't care what it costs, find the one responsible for this. And when you do, bring them to me. Mei Ling nodded. It will be done. As the room emptied, Zhang stood alone, staring out at the city. He could feel his empire crumbling beneath him, but he refused to let it fall. Whoever had done this would learn the true meaning of vengeance. And if Hydra wanted a war, he would give them one they would never forget. Jiang Wei was not a man to waste time mourning losses. By the time dawn broke over Shanghai, he had issued directives to his remaining lieutenants. His operations might be bleeding, but he still commanded an army of assassins, deadly, loyal, and eager to prove their worth. While Hydra and Mandarin International tore at each other's throats, Jiang focused on neutralizing the immediate threat, the shadowy figure orchestrating this chaos. Within hours, his orders began to take shape. Key targets were identified based on tenuous leads, and his assassins moved with brutal efficiency. The 10 Rings did not retreat, they struck back, clawing at any sign of weakness in their enemies. New York City. The assassin's code name was Viper. She had been with the 10 Rings for over a decade, her reputation as an elusive killer rivaled only by her precision. Jiang assigned her to a high-priority target, Alexander Pierce, a suspected Hydra liaison based in New York. If Hydra thought the Mandarin was their enemy, Jiang would exploit their paranoia by striking at their heart. Viper perched atop a derelict building in Manhattan, her silenced rifle aimed at the penthouse across the street. Pierce's movements had been tracked for weeks, but tonight he had deviated from routine. A late-night meeting, unusual guests. It was the perfect setup for a clean kill. She exhaled slowly, her crosshairs locking onto Pierce's figure behind the glass window. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Target acquired, she murmured into her comms. But just as she squeezed the trigger, an explosion rocked the building below her. A chain reaction of blasts followed, throwing her off balance. The sniper rifle clattered to the rooftop as she scrambled for cover. "What the?" Viper hissed, her earpiece crackling. "Viper, extraction compromised," a voice shouted over the line. "Hydra operatives, they're here. It's a setup." Before Viper could respond, gunfire erupted from the adjacent rooftop. Hydra snipers, alerted to her presence, had positioned themselves for a counterattack. Viper cursed, rolling behind a ventilation unit as bullets peppered her previous position. "Fall back," her handler ordered. "We'll regroup at the safe house." "Negative," Viper growled, her pride overriding her caution. She retrieved her rifle, quickly reconfiguring her aim. If she couldn't escape, she would ensure her target didn't either. But Pierce was already gone. Dubai. On the other side of the world, another killer was following Jiang's commands. Code-named Shadow, this agent was skilled in fighting up close and sneaking into places without being noticed. His goal was to take out a top Hydra agent in Dubai, who was believed to be planning the attacks on Mandarin International. Disguised as a maintenance worker, Shadow had quietly entered the fancy apartment building without anyone noticing. His target's apartment was on the 15th floor, and he moved as quietly as a ghost, hiding a blade in his sleeve. When he reached the door, he used a small gadget to turn off the electronic lock. The lock made a quiet beep, and the door opened. Shadow stepped inside, staying very alert and ready for anything. The room was dim, but he could hear soft whispers coming from the next room. Holding his knife, he moved quietly, his steps careful and precise. As he turned the corner, he spotted his target, a man sitting at a desk, facing away, talking on the phone. Shadow leapt forward, his knife aimed straight for the man's neck. But the target twisted in his chair at the last moment, revealing a smirk. "Too slow," the Hydra operative said, pulling a concealed gun and firing. Shadow dodged, the bullet grazing his shoulder as he rolled to the side. The Hydra agent barked an order, and armed guards burst into the room. Shadow fought valiantly, his blade flashing as he disarmed one attacker and took down another. But the numbers were overwhelming. A baton struck his temple, and his vision blurred as he collapsed to the floor. As the guards restrained him, the Hydra operative crouched down, his smirk returning. "Tell Jiang Wei, he picked the wrong fight." Shanghai. Back in Shanghai, Jiang Wei sat in his secure command center, monitoring the aftermath of his assassin's failed missions. Reports streamed in from across the globe, counterattacks, ambushes, and mounting losses. It was clear Hydra had anticipated his moves, turning his assassins into prey. "Sir," Lin reported, his voice tense. "We've lost contact with Viper in New York and Shadow in Dubai. Reports indicate Hydra was prepared for their arrival." Jiang's expression darkened. "And the bounty? Any progress?" Lin hesitated. "We've identified several potential leads, but nothing conclusive. Whoever orchestrated this has covered their tracks well. It's impressive." Jiang's gaze snapped to Lin, his voice a low growl. "Do not praise the enemy." Lin swallowed nervously and nodded. Yes, sir. Zhang's mind raced. This enemy, whoever they were, had turned the 10 rings against themselves, exploiting Hydra as a weapon of chaos. It was a move he might have admired under different circumstances. But admiration didn't matter now. What mattered was survival. He turned to Mei Ling. Contact our allies in Eastern Europe. Offer double their standard rate for immediate assistance. I want Hydra's operations crippled. If we can't kill their operatives, we'll burn their resources to the ground. Mei Ling nodded and left to relay the orders. As night fell over Shanghai, Zhang Wei stood once more by his office window, his reflection stark against the darkened skyline. His empire was bleeding, and his assassins hunted, but he was not defeated. Although from others' perspective it looked like he lost enough money to cripple him, they don't even know how wrong they actually are. Whoever had orchestrated this chaos had underestimated him. Zhang was a survivor, and the 10 rings were not so easily destroyed. If his enemies wanted a war, he would give them one, a war fought in the shadows, where the Mandarin thrived. Let them come, Zhang muttered to himself with a sinister expression. The veins on his face looked as if they would pop out at any moment. Let them think they've won. I'll show them the price of underestimating the 10 rings. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 16 advanced chapters, no double billing. Leave some reviews. Excalibur_X creators thoughts. 21 comments 0 vote. The 10 rings. Words. 2.7k words. Shanghai. Midnight. Zhang Wei's command center was buzzing with activities. His top officers and skilled team members worked smoothly, getting ready for the counterattack. Zhang's face was serious, his eyes focused. He stood at the front of the operations table, giving out his commands. Enough, his voice cut through the noise. The room went quiet, everyone looking at him. Hydra thinks they've outsmarted us. They think our problems mean we're weak. They think we can't fight back without falling apart. Let's show them how wrong they are. He motioned to Mei Ling, who stepped forward holding a tablet. The Hydra outposts, Zhang went on. Their main agents, bases, and supply routes. Are these locations confirmed? Mei Ling nodded. 40 confirmed outposts worldwide, each critical to Hydra's logistics and chain of command. We've pinpointed vulnerabilities at each location. Zhang's lips curled into a cold smile. Then here is my decree. Every outpost, every agent, every piece of Hydra infrastructure, destroy it. Leave no trace, no survivors. But, his gaze swept the room, we strike with precision. No collateral damage. Let the world see only the aftermath of our wrath, not the hand that delivered it. He turned to Lin. Assemble the shadow operatives. This mission is theirs. Ensure they understand the importance of silence and speed. Hydra will not have the luxury of understanding what hit them until it's too late. Lin bowed deeply. It will be done, sir. London, Hydra Communications Hub. The first attack happened at 2 a.m. local time. 3 shadow operatives sneaked into a Hydra communications center hidden under an old, abandoned warehouse in East London. They moved silently, like ghosts, and no one saw them until the guards began falling, either with their throats slit or necks snapped. The leader of the operatives planted a timed bomb on the main server. Before the guards could react, the team vanished into the night. The explosion disrupted Hydra's communications across Western Europe, creating confusion in their network. Rio de Janeiro, Logistics Depot. At 3:15 a.m. local time, a Hydra logistics depot in Rio de Janeiro was hit. The operative, code-named Ghost, slipped through their perimeter defenses with ease. She sabotaged their fuel reserves and planted charges along the ammunition stores. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, the depot erupted into flames. Hydra's operations in South America ground to a halt as their resources burned to ash. Cairo, Covert Training Facility. By 4 a.m. local time, a Hydra training camp in the desert near Cairo was completely destroyed. The shadow operatives used their deep understanding of the area to sneak in without being noticed. They quickly and efficiently took out both the instructors and the trainees in well-planned strikes. New York, Hydra Safe House. The strike in New York was personal. The safe house that had sheltered Alexander Pierce's operatives was breached at midnight. The shadow operative code-named Raven led the assault, leaving Hydra agents dead in their beds before they could draw a weapon. By the time the sun rose over the city, Hydra's presence had vanished, their influence cut off at the root. Tokyo, Research Facility. The final strike came at 6 a.m. Tokyo time. A Hydra research facility developing advanced surveillance tech was targeted. The Mandarin's agents planted viruses in their systems, corrupting years of data, and left the building engulfed in flames. Shanghai. By the next evening, reports flooded into Zhang Wei's command center. Hydra's global infrastructure was in ruins. 40 outposts were annihilated, hundreds of agents died, and the remnants of their organization were thrown into chaos. Lin approached Zhang, bowing deeply. Sir, the mission is complete. Every target was neutralized with no trace of our involvement. Hydra's retaliation capability has been crippled. Zhang nodded, satisfaction flickering across his otherwise stoic face. Good. They will be too busy licking their wounds to pose a threat for some time. But this is not the end. He turned to Mei Ling. The bounty, any leads? Mei Ling hesitated. Not yet, sir. Whoever placed it remains in the shadows, though Hydra is convinced we were behind their exposure. Their remaining forces are now focused on retaliation against us. Zhang smirked. Let them come. They will find nothing but death waiting for them. He strode to the window, gazing out at the illuminated city. We will rebuild, stronger, sharper, more vigilant. And as for the one who dared humiliate me. His fists clenched. They will learn the price of betrayal. The 10 rings do not forgive, and I do not forget. Shanghai. 2 days later, Zhang Wei's private office. The Mandarin sat behind an ebony desk, his piercing gaze fixed on the digital reports scrolling across the holographic display. Hydra had been dealt a devastating blow, but the larger threat remained. The frozen assets, the international investigations, and the relentless scrutiny of global law enforcement. The Mandarin's empire was bleeding, not from an external force but from the systemic pressure of governments and agencies he once evaded with ease. Now, it was time to use another weapon, influence. Mei Ling, Zhang said, his voice sharp as a blade. Mei Ling, ever efficient, stepped forward with a tablet in hand. Sir. Contact our liaisons in the governments of China, Russia, and the United States. Use the discretionary accounts. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly. All of them, sir. Yes, all of them. Make it clear that Mandarin International's cooperation is invaluable to their political and economic stability. If they refuse to drop the investigations, we will ensure they regret it. Mei Ling hesitated, her tone cautious. And if they cannot be bribed? Zhang's lips curled into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Then we remind them what happens when they make an enemy of the 10 rings. Leaks about their own corruption, destabilization of their regional assets, and sabotage of key industries. Politicians and generals have skeletons, Mei Ling. I will bury them under their own scandals if they do not comply. She nodded and moved to execute his orders. Washington, D.C. midnight. A high-ranking official sat alone in his study, staring at his encrypted laptop. An innocuous email had arrived hours earlier, marked with a simple subject line, a proposal. Inside, the message was anything but simple. It contained financial projections for a generous donation to his re-election campaign, backed by Mandarin International's offshore holdings. The attachment also included a dossier, a detailed list of his personal indiscretions and financial misconduct, with timestamps, photos, and evidence to match. The Mandarin's message was clear: take the bribe, or be destroyed. The official ran a trembling hand through his hair and reached for the secure phone on his desk. Tell the task force to stand down, he muttered. We've hit a dead end on the Mandarin case. Moscow, morning. The Mandarin's emissary, a smooth-talking operative named Victor, met with a senior Russian intelligence officer over a private breakfast. Over steaming tea and black bread, Victor presented a thin folder. Mr. Zhang Wei understands your position, Victor said in flawless Russian. He respects the sovereignty of your nation and wishes to be a friend to Russia. However, the charges against Mandarin International are damaging both our reputations. The officer opened the folder. Inside was a detailed map of an American missile site in Eastern Europe, information the Russians had been chasing for years. Victor leaned forward. All Mr. Zhang asks is for your government to de-escalate the investigation. In return, he will ensure the 10 rings operations avoid your territories entirely. Consider this a gesture of goodwill. The officer studied the map for a long moment before nodding. I will see what can be done. Beijing, evening. Back in his homeland, Jiang Wei leveraged his deep connections. He summoned a retired Politburo member to his office, offering tea and a polite conversation. You and I have always had a productive relationship, Jiang began, his tone smooth yet firm. Mandarin International has brought wealth and influence to our nation. These foreign investigations jeopardize everything we have built together. The elder official sipped his tea, his face unreadable. What do you propose, Mr. Jiang? Jiang leaned forward. Ensure that the government delays cooperation with Interpol and the IRS. Slow their progress. Distract them with other matters. In return, Mandarin International will double its investments in your infrastructure projects. I'll also personally guarantee that your family's business interests flourish. The official's eyes narrowed. And if I refuse? Jiang's smile turned razor sharp. Then I'll ensure every deal you've made in the last 10 years becomes public knowledge. Your legacy, your family, your standing, it will all burn. The official's shoulders stiffened, but after a moment, he nodded. I'll see what I can do. Shanghai, Command Center. Reports streamed in over the next 48 hours. Charges were quietly dropped or delayed in several jurisdictions. Investigations lost momentum as officials who once pursued the Mandarin suddenly found their priorities shifted. In some cases, Jiang's bribes worked. In others, his threats hit their mark. Lin approached Jiang, his expression a mix of relief and admiration. Sir, the majority of the international pressure is easing. Interpol has deprioritized our case, and the IRS is mired in bureaucratic red tape. Hydra's influence over certain agencies has also been diminished. Jiang nodded, his face calm. Good, but this is only the beginning. We will rebuild stronger, more elusive. Let this be a reminder to our enemies, the Mandarin does not fall. He turned to Mei Ling. Ensure that the contacts we pulled owe us their loyalty. Their silence has a price, and I expect them to pay it when the time comes. Yes, sir, Mei Ling replied, bowing. As the room emptied, Jiang stood alone by the window once more, the city lights glinting in his dark eyes. The empire he had built was battered but unbroken. He had survived yet another storm, proving that even in the face of global opposition, the Mandarin's reach remained unmatched. Let them believe they've won, Jiang murmured to himself. Let them rest easy for now. When I strike again, they won't even see it coming. 1 week later, Jiang Wei sat at his desk, staring at the screen in disbelief. His secure account, an impenetrable fortress of wealth, was now empty. A total of $10.7 billion, siphoned away in the dead of night, leaving nothing but a mocking message on the account's dashboard. The higher you rise, the harder you fall. His jaw tightened, the veins in his temple pulsing. It was a humiliation. He slammed his fist on the desk, the impact reverberating through the room. Mei Ling, he yelled. Mei Ling rushed into the office, her face pale. Yes, sir. Jiang's voice trembled a bit. The account, the one no one was supposed to know about. It's been emptied. How is that possible? Mei Ling hesitated, choosing her words carefully. We're still investigating, sir. The hack was flawless. There's no trail, no fingerprints. Whoever did this had resources and expertise beyond anything we've seen before. He shot her a glare that could cut glass. And yet, you still can't tell me who did it. She bowed her head. No, sir, not yet. Before Jiang could respond, Lin burst into the room, holding a tablet. Sir, there's more. The deals, our bribes, threats, everything, it's all public now. He handed the tablet to Jiang, whose eyes scanned the headlines. Mandarin International exposed. Secret deals, bribes, and threats rock global politics. Corruption unveiled. Shanghai's mastermind under fire. Is this the end of Jiang Wei? Each article was more damning than the last, detailing every bribe, every coerced official, every shadowy deal. Photographs, recordings, and documents were plastered across every major news outlet. Governments were scrambling to distance themselves, and Mandarin International's name had become synonymous with scandal. Jiang's knuckles turned white as he gripped the tablet. Arg! He threw the tablet across the room, where it shattered against the wall. His face was flushed, his eyes wild with fury. Mei Ling and Lin exchanged terrified looks. In all the years they had worked for the Mandarin, they had never seen him this angry. The Mandarin's paranoia was at an all-time high. He doubled his security detail and tripled it in some areas, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. And he was right. It began as he left his Shanghai headquarters late at night, accompanied by 4 armed guards. The elevator descended smoothly, the hum of its mechanics filling the silence. But as the doors opened to the underground parking garage, chaos erupted. A hail of bullets tore through the air, taking out 2 of his guards instantly. Zhang dove behind a concrete pillar, his instincts as sharp as ever. His remaining guards returned fire, but the assailants were skilled, coordinated, and relentless. "Sir, stay down," Lin shouted through his earpiece. Zhang peeked around the pillar, catching a glimpse of the attackers. They were clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by masks. These weren't amateurs, they were professionals, and their target was clear. He gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Mei Ling, what's happening?" Her voice crackled through the comms. "Sir, we're under attack at multiple locations. This isn't just here, it's coordinated. We've identified some of the attackers as the assassins we hired." Zhang's eyes narrowed. His own mercenaries turned against him. The parking garage echoed with the sounds of gunfire and shouting. One by one, his guards fell, leaving him alone. "Come on out, Mandy," one of the assassins called out mockingly. "We don't have all day." Zhang, the leader of the 10 Rings, didn't become the leader and built an empire that big just like that. It's been years since he was forced to fight on the front lines, but when it came to life or death situations, he was a one-man army. Be it 20 or 100 armed men, no one could touch him. The old feeling of rush and the smell of blood awakened the beast within him. He was the Mandarin, the leader of the 10 Rings, and this was his domain. The 10 rings on his fingers glinted in the darkness as he stepped out from his hiding spot, his face as calm as still water. "So, you've come to kill me? Oh, so you're finally out." The assassin in front, who seemed to be the leader, grinned. "To answer your question, yes, we've come to kill you." "How much are they paying you? And who wants my head?" he asked with a mocking smile. "What makes you think someone hired us?" The leader retorted. "You're a criminal and a tyrant, Zhang Wei, and the world will be better off without you." The Mandarin chuckled. "Oh please, stop the hypocrisy. All of us here are killers. So, since I've no way of defending myself, you are going to kill me. I think I at least deserve to know the name of the person who put the bounty on my head." A voice came from the comms the assassin leader was wearing, Victor Von Doom. "You're right," the leader replied. "We're all killers. Well, since this is your final moment, I'll indulge you with the name of your executioner. Victor Von Doom. $1 billion for your head. So, nothing personal, it's just money." The voice spoke again through the comms, $2 billion transferred to your account. White money, tax paying. Enjoy. The Mandarin smirked. He knew exactly who that was. "Ha ha 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 ha," he laughed, his voice echoing throughout the parking lot. "Is that so? Good. You've done me a favor, my friend." The assassin looked at Zhang in confusion. "What do you mean by that?" Everything before Zhang stood still as if stopped in time as he expanded the 10 rings on his hand. They glowed brightly as the air around him started crackling with electricity. A blast of lightning tore the 20-man assault team into shreds, leaving nothing but ashes behind. Zhang Wei grinned as he looked at the pile of ashes that used to be his enemies. He then turned towards the security cameras, looking at them dead in the eye. "I'm coming for you next, Victor." Stark Mansion. Tony sat in his lab with a satisfied smile. He had almost forgotten about Victor Von Doom. Luckily, Victor's name came when he was going through the old records that he copied from Reed's lab before his death. There was a mention of a collab between the two. Fight and kill each other, he smirked. Maybe I should pin Reed's death on his head too. Oh, this will be fun. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 15 advanced chapters, no double billing. 38 comments, 0 vote. Tony and Howard. The fire crackled in the fireplace as Howard Stark relaxed in his leather chair, staring at his son. The room went through some changes in the past few years. Now, there was a big polished mahogany desk with a Lego city structure built on it. The bookshelves looked new, not to mention the big globe near the window with pins on certain locations. Tony sat across from him, legs crossed, with the relaxed confidence that only a 17-year-old prodigy could muster. "So, Tony," Howard began, his voice calm but firm. "What's the plan? You're not going to lounge around the lab all day tinkering with hot rods, are you?" Tony raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. "Tinkering is how I relax, Dad. Some people play golf, I build things. You should try it sometime, it might loosen you up. I guess it's been a while since you fixed something." Howard chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm serious. You've got a mind that could change the world. Stark Industries is waiting for you. The board's already chomping at the bit to see when you'll start learning the ropes." Tony leaned back, his expression contemplative. "Yeah, about that. Do I have to follow the script? Take over the company, become the face of Stark Industries, shake hands with senators, and attend boring galas? Because, honestly, that sounds like a snooze fest." Howard folded his arms, his tone sharpening slightly. "It's not just about running a company, son. Stark Industries is more than a business, it's a legacy. Your grandfather built it, and I've spent my life making sure it stays on the top. The work we do has a real-world impact. Defense contracts keep this country safe. Our innovations drive progress. That's not something to shrug off." Tony already knew about all that. However, he has a goal. So far everything went according to his plan. He saved Janet, annihilated 90% of Hydra, killed Reed before he could become the Maker, messed up Mandarin International, and even managed to put it all on Victor. And he managed to save his parents, at least for now. He bought time. However, the tumor in his brain still remains. He planned to somehow get rid of that tumor or future Infinity Gem out of his head. Although he got rid of Reed, there's still a chance that someone might come after him in the future, like another Maker from an alternate timeline. And the pain, well, it sometimes gets too much, and he blacks out. It's like a ticking time bomb inside his head, waiting for the right trigger to activate it. He needs to be ready for anything that could happen in the future. So, if the present technology and knowledge can't get rid of it, then he's going to have to invent it. To do that, he needed time, money, materials, and a place where he could work without getting interrupted. So, he planned to talk his dad into giving him what he wanted, in a bit roundabout way. He sighed, "I know, Dad. I know the company matters. But, I don't want to just inherit your legacy. I want to build my own. Something bigger, something different." Howard's expression softened. He leaned forward. "Then tell me. What is it you want, Tony? What drives you?" Tony hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. But I know this much. I love creating things. Not for a board of directors or a government contract, but for the sake of creation itself. There's so much potential out there, clean energy, advanced AI, medical tech. And I want to explore it. Not because I have to, but because I can." Howard regarded his son thoughtfully. "So, you're saying you want freedom. Freedom to innovate without the weight of expectations." He nodded. "Exactly. I want to make things that matter, not because they're profitable, but because they're necessary. And yeah, maybe I'll make a few mistakes along the way, but at least they'll be my mistakes. Besides, you are there to help me out when I need direction, right?" Howard leaned back in his chair, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You remind me of someone." Tony tilted his head, intrigued. "Who, Grandpa?" Howard chuckled. "No, me. When I took over Stark Industries, everyone told me what I should do, and how I should run the business. But I ignored them and built something on my own terms. You've got that same spark, Tony. And as much as the board would hate me for saying this, you don't have to follow their playbook. You just have to follow your instincts." Tony looked up, surprised. "So, you're saying I don't have to take over Stark Industries?" Howard shook his head. "I'm saying it's your choice. But whatever you decide, don't take it lightly. If you walk away, the company will survive. But if you step in, you have the chance to transform it into something the world's never seen before." For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Tony met his father's gaze, a new sense of respect flickering in his eyes. "Got a yacht." He took a deep breath before speaking. "Okay, Dad, how about this? I don't take over Stark Industries right now. Instead, you give me a shot, my own shot, under the Stark Industries banner. A new sector. Let me run it my way, focus on the future I see, and prove to you what I can do." Howard raised an eyebrow, curiosity mingling with skepticism. A new sector? And what exactly would this sector be focused on? Tony's eyes lit up, the passion behind them unmistakable. Innovation. No defense contracts, no politicians breathing down my neck, just pure, unfiltered progress. Clean energy, AI, advanced materials, medical tech, the stuff that's going to matter 50 years from now, not just next quarter's earnings. Howard leaned back, considering his son's words. And you think you can pull that off? You're asking me to hand over resources, staff, and capital for something that might not see a return for decades. Tony shrugged, his confidence back in full force. Risk is part of innovation, right? You took risks when you took over Stark Industries. I'm asking for the same chance. Give me 3 years, Dad. That's it. 3 years to show you what I can build. If I don't deliver, we'll go back to the original plan, handshakes, galas, the whole deal. But if I succeed, he paused, letting the weight of his words settle. If I succeed, you'll have a company that's not just leading, it's redefining the game. Howard tapped his fingers on the armrest, the crackling fire casting flickering shadows across his face. 3 years. Isn't that too short to achieve much? Tony shook his head, his voice firm. No, it isn't. 3 years is enough to get something started. To create a foundation. I know I can do it. All you have to do is trust me. Howard regarded his son thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. Then his lips twitched in a reluctant smile. You've always been persuasive, I'll give you that. All right, I'll give you everything you need, no question asked. Capital, manpower, materials. You will have everything, but you have to prove me wrong. Not just with your talk, but with results. I need to see the world changing, paradigm shifting, history-making innovation you claim you can deliver. Otherwise, we do things my way. Tony nodded, standing up. I will, and you won't be sorry. Howard stood as well, a faint gleam of pride in his eyes. Oh, I almost forgot. Tony turned. You made any progress on the arc reactor? Howard let out a sigh. Not yet. Although your calculations back then helped with the design, I was able to shrink the giant size of it by a lot. The energy fluctuation also stabilized. But it's still a long way from being a clean energy source for everyone though. Wanna make a bet? He asked, with a grin. Howard looked at him. You want to build the arc reactor? Yep, and what are the stakes? Tony thought for a moment. An island, the best one, and out of the records and grids. Howard looked at him in surprise. You know how many islands are out there? I am sure I can narrow it down. Howard raised an eyebrow. Okay, if you do it, you get your island. And if you lose? Tony took out a little drive and handed it to his father. Access to Pentagon. They are using Mandarin International technology. I'm pretty sure what that means, right? You get to prove that their technology is flawed and weak. That will give you a chance to make a big deal with the officials. And a deal of such scale means money. Plus, with the mess going on with Mandarin International, I'm pretty sure you won't let this chance go. So, he smirked. Pentagon. You are kidding, right? Howard looked at him with concern. Am I? Tony said as he placed the drive on the table. Well, now that I think of it, it'd be a waste to wait for them to recover. Forget the bet, you can have it, and don't forget my island. With that, he left. As Tony left, Howard couldn't help but laugh. His son is one step ahead of him again. He smiled, shaking his head in amusement. It was hard to believe that Tony was still so young. He already had a clear vision of what he wanted to do with his life and wasn't afraid to speak his mind. It reminded Howard of himself when he was younger, a little less mature, maybe, but just as driven and ambitious. And it seemed like those qualities would serve Tony well as he took on his next challenge, building a new division for Stark Industries. A division dedicated to research and development of cutting-edge technologies with the potential to revolutionize the world. A division that could change the future. So, you aren't after profits, but want to make the world a better place. Ha ha, count on me, son, he chuckled. And if Howard knew anything, it was that when Tony set his sights on something, he didn't stop until he achieved it. Whether it was mastering quantum mechanics, inventing a new kind of robotics and car engine, or winning the science fair competition, he always found a way to make his dreams a reality. And this time would be no different. The future was waiting, and Howard knew that the world wouldn't be ready for what his son had in store. The future is now, and Next chapter will begin after 1 year time skip. And if you are wondering what he did with Reed's research, well, he'll learn from them and modify them. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 15 advanced chapters, no double billing. 31 comments, 0 vote. Nanites, arc reactor and a red head. Tony Stark's new facility in Malibu, 1 year later. The large complex, sitting on a cliff with a view of the Pacific Ocean, looked like any other big facility, but with advanced securities. Officially under the Stark Industries banner, it was known as the Stark Research and Innovation Center (SRIC). Unofficially, Tony simply called it home. Inside, the core of the facility was full of activity, not from people, but from machines. Robots buzzed and mechanical arms moved quickly, doing exact jobs controlled by a group of smart eyes. Hermes, Tony's main AI, managed the whole place, organizing every machine, task, and new invention. Tony turned Elena into a specialized medical AI. It assisted in his current obsession, liquid nanotechnology for medical applications and finding a way to get the tumor infinity gem out of his head. And, of course, his loyal robotic helpers, Dumb E and U, lent their often comedic, if clumsy, support. When Tony first arrived in Malibu, his vision was clear, but the path to achieving it required starting from scratch. He initially intended to hire the best minds in the world, renowned engineers, scientists, and visionaries. However, the more he considered the complexities of collaboration, the more he realized something crucial: he worked best alone. Collaboration could come later, when his foundation was unshakable. The solution was automation. With Hermes at the helm, Tony focused on designing a small army of robots and automated manufacturing systems. These machines, precise and tireless, began constructing more machines, enabling an exponential growth in productivity. The facility soon boasted fully automated labs, workshops, and cleanrooms, all tailored to his specifications. Why deal with interns when I can build perfect ones? Tony quipped to himself, watching one of his robotic arms assemble a complex circuit with meticulous precision. His first major project was the development of liquid nanites, a concept that combined advanced materials science, robotics, and bioengineering. These nanites, if perfected, would be capable of cellular-level repairs, healing injuries, neutralizing toxins, and even enhancing human biology. The process had been grueling, requiring breakthroughs in multiple disciplines. Tony began by designing a nanoparticle chassis composed of a unique vibranium alloy derivative he synthesized, capable of self-replication under controlled conditions. However, to achieve his goal, he needed an in-depth understanding of the human body, something that was outside his initial expertise. Not to mention the quantity of vibranium was very limited. He had to rope his dad into giving him the metal. So, he was in no position to waste such important material. "So, you're telling me I need to become a doctor now?" he muttered after his initial research left him grappling with gaps in his knowledge. His solution: learn fast. Thanks to the infinity gem embedded in his brain, Tony's intelligence operated on a level far beyond normal human capacity as usual. While most people spent over a decade earning MDs and PhDs, Tony devoured medical textbooks, streamed lectures, and conducted virtual surgeries within months. By the 4th month, he had amassed a knowledge base comparable to that of seasoned medical researchers. Well, he wanted to get his license, but it would require time, and time is what he doesn't have. So, he simply began the nanites creation. The development of the new variants of nanites wasn't easy. Prototype Alpha, a disaster. The nanites successfully targeted and repaired synthetic tissue but caused severe inflammation when introduced into living organisms. Okay, maybe I shouldn't trust Elena's optimism. Back to the drawing board. Prototype Beta. Marginally better. The nanites avoided immune rejection but failed to synchronize properly with nerve signals, rendering them ineffective for delicate repairs. Tony sighed, muttering, "I need to teach these little guys teamwork." Prototype Gamma. A breakthrough. By incorporating biomimetic algorithms into the nanites' programming, Tony achieved something extraordinary. The machines could adapt to their host's physiology, integrating seamlessly with natural healing processes. The first successful trial on living tissue occurred late one night in the lab. A synthesized organ sample, riddled with artificial micro-tears, was healed flawlessly within minutes. Tony watched the data streaming across his holographic displays, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. "That's it. That's the future," he whispered, leaning back in his chair. Despite the breakthrough, Tony was acutely aware of the project's limitations. The nanites required massive computational power to operate in real time, which made them impractical for widespread use, yet. Additionally, scaling production to a level where the technology could benefit millions presented logistical nightmares. There has to be a better solution. A light bulb lit up in Tony's mind, and he started designing a specialized AI that could control and coordinate the nanites. He called it Legion. The Legion AI, capable of directing trillions of nanites simultaneously. Well, it's still a work in progress. Tony leaned back in his chair, the holographic blueprints of Legion still floating before him in his lab. The AI's architecture was complex and far more advanced than Hermes or Elena. It needed to be. It was destined to manage not just trillions of nanites but also their seamless integration into the human body. Yet, as he watched the simulations unfold, something gnawed at him. The computational demands of Legion were astronomical. Even with his most advanced servers and Hermes optimizing every process, it wasn't enough. And that meant one thing: power. Real, unrelenting, near-limitless power. Tony's gaze shifted to the far corner of the lab, where a stack of old blueprints sat collecting dust. It's time for the arc reactor. The first step was updating the design. With the resources at Stark Research and Innovation Center, he quickly digitized the blueprints, overlaying modern schematics onto the old foundation. He tapped into Hermes to simulate the design in 3D, identifying weak points and areas for optimization. The heart of the reactor was the challenge: a vibranium core. Vibranium's unique energy-absorbing properties made it the perfect material for stabilizing the reactor's immense energy output. But Tony had a limited supply. Convincing his father to part with even a fraction of the Stark family's vibranium reserves had been a diplomatic nightmare. Borrowing a little more for this project. Let's just say Howard didn't need to know, yet. "All right, you beautiful metal, don't let me down," he muttered, placing a piece of vibranium into a precision laser cutter. The core needed to be flawless. One imperfection and the reactor would fail catastrophically. Tony didn't just want to build an arc reactor. He wanted to build the world's first miniaturized arc reactor. The version he envisioned could sit in the palm of his hand, a marvel of engineering capable of powering Legion and a dozen other projects he hadn't even conceived yet. This required a deep dive into electromagnetism, particle physics, and quantum mechanics. Well, he got that part covered. The biggest obstacle was heat dissipation. A device so compact running at such high energy levels threatened to melt itself, or worse, explode. Tony solved the issue by designing a multi-layer cooling system, utilizing nanofluidic channels that cycled liquid nitrogen around the core in microseconds. After weeks of work, countless failed simulations, and a few sleepless nights, the reactor was finally ready for its first live test. The lab was eerily silent as Tony placed the small, circular device into a containment chamber. Hermes chimed in. Energy stabilization parameters set. System diagnostics green across the board. "Thanks, Hermes. Now let's see if this baby sings," Tony replied, fingers hovering over the activation button. With a deep breath, he pressed the button. The arc reactor hummed to life. A soft blue glow emanated from the vibranium core, casting dancing shadows across the walls. The hum grew louder, steadier, as the reactor stabilized. Data scrolled across Tony's holographic display, output stable at 20.2 gigajoules per second. No heat anomalies detected. "Fuck yeah," Tony grinned, a triumphant laugh escaping him. "I was aiming for 5.56, but 20.2. Damn, I'm genius." With the arc reactor now operational, his mind buzzed with possibilities. This wasn't just a power source for Legion, it was a gateway to a new era of energy independence. He envisioned cities powered by reactors the size of suitcases, cars that never needed refueling, and satellites capable of indefinite operation. And, of course, the reactor would make the perfect centerpiece for his Iron Man suit, a concept he hadn't touched yet but was growing more tempting by the day. One step at a time, Tony reminded himself, though his smirk betrayed the flood of ideas racing through his mind. He leaned back in his chair, the glow of the arc reactor reflected in his eyes. His father had laid the groundwork, but he completed the vision. With the arc reactor ready, Tony knew it was time to push the Legion AI and the nanites into their next phase. The power constraints that had limited their functionality were no longer an issue. The focus shifted to scalability and precision. However, the AI was still in the learning phase and would take a week or two. "Sir, you've been working non-stop. How about you take a break?" Hermes suggested, concerned for his creator's mental health. "You're right, Hermes." Tony stood up from his chair and stretched his arms, followed by a large yawn. "Well, time to get some fresh air. Put the security to red level. Capture if any unauthorized person trespasses. If the case of property harm or break-in, break their limbs and throw them in the containment chamber. Red level, security level 12. Capture and lock-up protocols in place," Hermes acknowledged. "Great, be right back," Tony said, walking out of his lab. He went to the bathroom and took a quick bath, then got dressed. Afterward, he took his wallet and keys, then walked out of the facility. Tony walked down the winding path leading from the facility to the beach. The salty breeze whipped through his hair, carrying with it the rhythmic crash of the waves below. Malibu was a haven of calm, but Tony's mind buzzed with the afterglow of his latest triumph. The arc reactor was a game changer, but now, he needed a reward for himself. Junk food and a cold Coke sounded like perfection. The beachside restaurant wasn't fancy. It was one of those casual joints with outdoor seating, a few surfboards propped up for decoration, and a large fish prop on display. The aroma of grilled burgers, fries, and fried seafood hung in the air, pulling Tony in like a tractor beam. As he entered, the place was buzzing with chatter, the sound of plates clinking, and the occasional laughter of patrons enjoying the laid-back atmosphere. The place was packed up with one seat open. A woman sat at the table, her back to him. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face. She wore a simple blue shirt and short jeans, but her posture gave her an air of quiet elegance. She looked tired, her shoulders slightly slouched as she flipped through a menu, occasionally glancing into her purse. "Hey, is this seat taken?" He walked to her and asked casually, pointing to the chair next to her. The woman turned, startled for a moment before her expression softened. Her green irises locked on his. Wow! He noticed how beautiful the woman before her was, and there was something different about her but couldn't put his finger on it, and he became curious. "Not at all," she said, her tone polite but tinged with weariness. She pushed her purse aside to make room. He took the seat, gesturing to the bartender for a menu. "Rough day?" he asked, flashing a disarming smile. The waiter quickly came and handed him the menu. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "You could say that. It's been one of those days where everything that can go wrong, does." "Ah, the old Murphy's Law special," Tony said, leaning on the counter. "Let me guess. You dropped your phone, missed a deadline, and now you're debating whether fries or onion rings will make it better." The corner of her mouth twitched into a reluctant smile. "Close. It's more like figuring out if I can afford either." Tony's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, quickly replaced by a look of genuine concern. "That bad, huh?" he asked, his voice softening. The woman sighed, clearly debating whether to confide in this stranger. After a brief pause, she leaned back in her chair, running a hand through her hair. "Let's just say life's been throwing me curveballs left and right." Tony rested his elbows on the counter, curiosity sparking in his eyes. "Care to share? I promise I'm a great listener. And who knows, I might even have a solution or two up my sleeve." She snorted softly, shaking her head. "Doubt it, but sure, why not? I could use a vent." She took a sip of water from her glass before continuing. "I just graduated with a BBA. Landed what I thought was my dream job. Decent pay, opportunities for growth, the work. But then my boss decided my resume wasn't the only thing he wanted to evaluate." Tony's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "I turned him down, obviously," she said, her tone sharp with lingering anger. "But the guy wouldn't take no for an answer. Last night, he cornered me in his office. I warned him to back off, but he didn't listen." "What happened?" Tony asked, leaning in slightly. Her lips curved into a bitter smile. "Let's just say he's going to have a hard time breathing and walking for a while. I might have busted his nose and nuts." Tony couldn't help it. "Ha ha ha ha." She glared at him. He raised his hands defensively. "Sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at the image of this creep getting what he deserves." "Well," He did, she said, her tone softening slightly. But it didn't end there. Security showed up, the cops were called, and guess who got arrested for assault? Yours truly. You're kidding. He closed the menu. Nope. She rubbed her temples, exhaustion evident in her movements. I had to bribe my way out, and now I'm down to my last few bucks. Rent's due next week, and I've got no idea what I'm going to do. Tony studied her for a moment, his mind working fast. This wasn't just anyone sitting next to him, this was someone with guts, someone who didn't back down when pushed. He admired that. You've had one hell of a week, he said, his tone sympathetic. But hey, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. She shrugged. Doesn't feel like it right now. Ah, look at us, talking without knowing each other's names, Tony remarked. He extended his hand toward her. Tony Stark. She shook his hand. Natasha Romanoff. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 15 advanced chapters, no double billing. 40 comments, 0 vote. Natasha and Tony. Tony sat back in his chair, a casual smile plastered on his face, though his mind was working overtime. Natasha Romanoff. The name sent alarm bells ringing in the back of his head. In the comics from his past life memories, Natasha is a complex character. A deadly operative who often worked for either S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Red Room, and someone whose motives were rarely clear. Was her presence here really just a coincidence? Or had he been marked by someone already watching his every move? If she was a spy, there was no telling how deep this went. And this entire place reeks of a setup. Someone might be keeping an eye on him, and as soon as he got out of his lab, they'd put their little plan into action. Starting with the restaurant, which is completely packed up with just a single seat open before her, and then her emotional story. This isn't a coincidence. This is a trap. All these people around me could be spies. Gotta act normal. He considered leaving right away, but it will alert them and it's dangerous. But Tony didn't let his growing paranoia show. Well, Natasha Romanoff, seems like the universe decided we needed to meet. So, why don't we make the best of it? Let's put all the worries behind us for a moment and enjoy a good lunch. And not to worry, it's on me and I won't take a no, he said with his usual charming smile. He motioned to the waiter. Her meal's on me. Get her whatever she wants, plus dessert. Natasha raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint smile. You don't have to do that. Tony waved her off. Please, it's a small gesture. Besides, I owe you for the entertainment value of imagining you taking down your boss. She chuckled softly, and he saw some of the tension ease from her posture. The waiter arrived, pen and paper in hand. Tony ordered a jumbo cheeseburger and a side of onion rings, then glanced at Natasha. I'll have the same, thank you. The waiter was about to leave. Wow, wait a sec, he stopped the waiter and turned to Natasha. You don't want dessert? Come on, you can't have a good meal without something sweet. I don't think I can finish all this, she said, a playful glint in her eyes. Nonsense. I'll eat whatever you can't finish. Well, all right, in that case, bring me the apple pie. Coming right up, the waiter said, heading back into the kitchen. The two made small talk as they waited for the food, with Tony steering the conversation away from the heavy topics and focusing on lighthearted banter. He was careful to avoid divulging any details about his past or his current work. When the food arrived, Natasha dug in with gusto. Tony was surprised to see her put away the massive burger with ease. He signed the waiter to bring another one. Natasha didn't argue and smiled at him. The waiter brought another burger and she took another big bite without holding back. She noticed how he was looking at her with an expression that screamed, "Is this girl for real?" "What, you think a girl can't eat?" she said, smirking. Tony shook his head. "No, I'm just impressed. I didn't expect you to pack it away like a champ. I don't get out much, and my diet consists of cheap takeout," she said between bites. "So, this is a real treat. Besides, gotta fill myself up because tonight I might go to bed empty stomach." She took another bite and tried to speak. "Thanks for the food." "My pleasure. As for dinner, how about we meet here tonight? Only if you want to," he pointed it out not to sound like a creep. She smiled, her gaze turning coy. "I'd love that, but, what's the catch? People don't usually do nice things for strangers without wanting something in return." You're not a stranger anymore. We've spent the last 30 minutes talking about life and eating together. That makes us friends, and friends look out for each other. Right, Tony asked, taking a bite of his burger. Friends. Yeah, I like the sound of that, Natasha nodded. So, he arched an eyebrow. All right, fine, she laughed, shaking her head. I'll meet you here tonight. But don't be surprised if I clean out your wallet. I wouldn't dream of it, Tony replied with a smile. The two finished their meals, then came the dessert. The apple pie was warm and fresh, the perfect ending to a surprisingly enjoyable lunch. Afterward, Tony and Natasha parted ways, with plans to meet up later that evening. After getting out of the restaurant, he decided to take a walk around the beach. He casually walked with his hands in his pocket. The sound of waves hitting the shore and the distant calls of seagulls should have been relaxing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. He looked around at the people nearby, joggers, sunbathers, and surfers, but nothing seemed unusual. He found a quiet spot near some rocks and sat down on a flat, sun-warmed stone, leaning back against it. The ocean breeze ruffled his hair. For a moment, he let himself unwind, taking deep breaths and releasing the stress that had been building up for weeks. He stretched out on the rock and let out a big yawn. Well, time to take a little rest and calm my mind. Can't let the paranoia get the best of me. He closed his eyes and focused on his breathing. After resting for 1 hour, he stretched his legs lazily, then sat up and dusted his clothes. The brief rest had done wonders to clear his mind, but the nagging feeling of unease remained. Tony returned to his facility. But instead of going into the main building, he went to the small building on the right side of the building. The sterile, minimalist room was lined with high-tech equipment, its centerpiece a cylindrical full-body scanner. He took off his clothes, placed them in a box-shaped scanner, and then stepped onto the main scanner platform. Hermes, initiate a full-body scan. I want a detailed report on any anomalies, including external trackers or embedded devices. Also, run a sweep of my clothes. Understood, sir. Beginning scan sequence, Hermes replied. The scanner whirred to life, its blue light sweeping over Tony's body in precise, methodical passes. A separate arm reached for his clothes, scanning each article with equal precision. Tony stood still, arms crossed, as the process unfolded. Give me the good news, Hermes. Or the bad, I can handle either. The AI's calm voice came through the overhead speakers. Scan complete. Results are as follows. No foreign objects or trackers detected. Your clothing also tests negative for any embedded surveillance devices. You are clean, sir. Tony exhaled, a mix of relief and frustration. That's good, but it means they're either really clever or I'm just being paranoid. Let's keep security on high alert, just in case. Red level security remains active. Shall I enhance monitoring protocols in the surrounding area? Yeah, extend the perimeter sweeps and run facial recognition on any newcomers in Malibu over the past week. And run a facial recognition on all the people in that restaurant. Let's see if there's a pattern. Understood. I will begin immediately. Tony stepped out of the scanner, grabbing a fresh set of clothes from a nearby locker. As he dressed, his mind returned to Natasha. Whether she was friend or foe, one thing was certain, she was far from ordinary. And if there was one thing Tony Stark couldn't resist, it was a good mystery. Night 9 p.m. Tony arrived at the restaurant just before 9 p.m., walking as he always did, hands in his pockets, wearing a plain black t-shirt and jeans. Nothing about him stood out, which was just the way he wanted it. Inside, the place had a relaxed vibe, the crowd thinner than earlier in the day. He spotted Natasha right away. She was seated at their table from lunch, wearing a simple blue shirt and black pants. She looked casual. He walked over with a small smile. Hey, glad to see you made it. Natasha smiled back. I almost thought you wouldn't show. Tony chuckled as he sat down. Me, never. Let's just say I don't pass up good food or good company. They opened the menu and continued to chat. So, what's your story? She asked, leaning in slightly, her tone curious. What exactly do you do? You're one of the Starks, right? Just a regular guy, really, he said with a shrug. I like to tinker around with stuff. Build things. He kept it vague, not wanting to give away too much, but also not wanting to seem evasive. Natasha's eyes narrowed slightly, but she smiled, clearly not fully buying the simplicity of his answer. Tinker, Huh, sounds like you might be hiding something. Tony chuckled. Maybe, but it's nothing too exciting. Just some hobbies, that's all. Their waiter approached with a notepad, ready to take their order. He glanced at her with a raised brow, signaling her to go first. All right, Natasha said, tapping her chin for a moment. I'll have the kebab platter and noodle bowl. A Diet Coke. Tony nodded. Good choice. He turned to the waiter. I'll have the barbecue chicken wings, chicken parm, and cream soda. The waiter scribbled on his notepad, then nodded. I'll have your orders up shortly. So, what about you, Natasha? Tony asked, leaning back in his chair as he rested his hands behind his head. What do you do when you're not, looking for a new job or enjoying a burger with random guys at lunch? She smirked, clearly enjoying the playful tone in his voice. I do a lot of things. Work mostly, you know. But when I have time off, I like to read and watch movies. Any recommendations? Tony smiled. Well, I've recently discovered that sci-fi isn't so bad. You should check out Star Wars. It's a classic. I thought you were going to say Godfather, she said, chuckling softly. He shrugged. Godfather is great, but I'm not into gangster stories. What about you? What's your favorite? Well, I do like to watch horror movies, she said with an innocent smile. His eyes widened, raising an eyebrow. Really? Like slasher films? Stuff like that? Yeah, she sounded amused by his reaction. I love old classic movies. Candyman, Psycho, etc. And yeah, Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, all that stuff. Love it. The conversation shifted to books as their food arrived. Natasha seemed particularly interested in Tony's choice of reading material. You read much? She asked, taking a bite of kebab. Or are you more into just movies? Both, actually. I'm into anything with a bit of mystery. You know, like Sherlock Holmes, the original stuff. But I also like modern thrillers. You ever read any of the Jack Reacher books? Those are fun. Definitely, she said with a nod. I've read a few. Reacher's a bit of a brute, but the stories are always a good time. They both dug into their food, the conversation flowing easily between bites. Tony found himself laughing more than he expected, enjoying the way their banter was so easy. He never expected someone like Natasha to feel so normal. But deep inside, he knew it was all fake. The real question was who was the spider and who was the fly. Their conversation carried on, flowing easily between topics as they finished their meals. Well, Natasha said, looking at him with a raised brow. This was fun. Thanks for the dinner. It's not every day I get treated to a meal like this. Tony smiled, leaning in slightly. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And hey, we could always do this again sometime. Well, you know, as much as I'd like to take up on that offer, I still have to figure out my job situation. But, thanks, she said softly. Sigh. A job, huh, tell you what, meet me here tomorrow at noon around 2. Maybe, I could help you out in finding a good job. And no catch, I promise. We're friends, right? She considered his offer. Okay, but don't go and pull some rich guy stunt. It will piss me off. Wouldn't dream of it, Tony replied. Natasha rose from her seat, giving Tony one final smile. Tomorrow then. He watched her leave, the growing feeling in his chest unsettling. That smile, the look on her face didn't match what he was seeing. What really lay behind her fake facade? Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 15 advanced chapters, no double billing. Check out the new FF from Unknown Master. Excalibur_X creators thoughts. 36 comments 0 vote. The butterfly effect. Tony stepped out of the scanner for the second time that day, his expression grim as he watched the readout confirm, once again, that no foreign objects had been found. The burn chamber adjacent to the scanner flared briefly as his clothes were incinerated. He checked his phone and the data that Natasha sent him related to her qualifications. He simply typed it manually on the console and discarded the phone. Better be careful, there might be a bug in the data that she sent him, which might have escaped Hermes' scans and he won't risk it. With AI anything could happen, even a tiny slip-up is possible if one knows how. Hermes, status update on Legion's learning phase and the facial recognition. Legion is at 73% of the learning phase, sir. Current projections estimate completion within 48 hours, barring interruptions. Facial recognition on individuals from the restaurant is 42% complete. Tony rubbed his chin. Keep me posted. Expand the recognition algorithm to include international databases, just in case. Understood, sir. With the night pressing in and his thoughts swirling like a hurricane, Tony made his way to the gym room. The space was state-of-the-art, filled with high-tech exercise equipment and training gear. But tonight, he only needed the basics, a sandbag and his fists. Gym room. Dressed in simple black athletic gear, Tony wrapped his hands tightly, his movements mechanical, his mind elsewhere. The gym lights cast sharp shadows, their flickering barely noticeable as he squared up in front of the sandbag. He started slow, throwing light jabs. Jab, jab, breathe. His thoughts drifted back to Natasha. The look in her eyes, the smile that didn't quite reach them. The way she effortlessly deflected his questions while steering the conversation toward him. She was good, too good. Right hook, jab, uppercut. Who are you, Natasha Romanoff? He muttered under his breath. The sandbag swayed under the increasing force of his punches. Sweat began to bead on his forehead, but he didn't stop. His mind replayed everything in his head for that day: the crowded restaurant, her perfectly calculated responses, and how easily she fell into conversation with him. All seemed too easy, too flawless. Left hook, jab, jab, trap or coincidence? He asked himself, throwing a powerful cross that sent the sandbag swinging wildly. He stepped back, breathing hard. Phew, getting rusty. His eyes were fixed on the sandbag, but his mind was miles away. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being played. Hermes, he called out, still panting. Yes, sir. Do we have any anomalies in Malibu's surveillance feeds from the last 24 hours? Negative, sir. No anomalies detected within the specified timeframe. Tony shook his head, grabbing a towel to wipe the sweat off his face. Expand the search radius to 50 miles and include offshore activity. Understood. He slumped onto a nearby bench, elbows on his knees. The gym was silent, except for the soft hum of the facility's systems. His instincts screamed that something wasn't right, but he had no evidence, only the nagging feeling that Natasha wasn't who she pretended to be. Then came the throbbing headache. It's been a while since the last one, he thought, grimacing. He took out a pill bottle from his pocket. He always carries them, just in case. Popping a few painkillers, he closed his eyes and waited. After a while, the throbbing lessened to a dull ache. Damn, he mumbled. Heaving himself off the bench, he tossed the towel to the side. The sandbag hung motionless, waiting for his next blow. Jab, cross, uppercut. The next few hours were spent working out his frustrations, both mental and physical. Finally, he lay on the floor, covered in sweat and breathing heavily. After that, he stood up and went to take a shower before going to his bedroom, but he couldn't sleep and kept tossing around. Sigh. Unable to relax, Tony found himself in his workshop. The holographic interface sprang to life as he activated the main console. He called up the Legion program's progress, watching the streams of data scroll across the screen. He tapped the table absent-mindedly, his thoughts returning to Natasha. Her comment about jobs had stuck with him. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer, he said aloud, his gaze drifting over to a set of monitors. They showed a rotating view of the property and its surroundings. Everything looked peaceful, quiet. Tony's brow furrowed. I need eyes everywhere. Let's see. He accessed the Shield's database through the back door he created way back, and he kept updating it to make sure no one found it and playing with him using a fake database. Now, over the next hour, he went through the new data, looking for anything unusual or out of place. Finally, after 2 hours of searching, he found what he was looking for. The new director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nicholas Fury. There wasn't much info on him, but Tony doesn't need info on him because he already knows Fury from the comics and movies. But what caught his eye was a simple mention of the Red Room. The rest of the details didn't make much sense and seemed to be a code of some sort. And there was no mention of Natasha's name. It's either Fury kept her off-grid or Red Room. I hope it's not Red Room because it'll be a pain in the ass, he mumbled to himself, tapping his fingers on the workbench. Well, time to create a job opportunity for her somewhere in Malibu. He chuckled, shaking his head. According to the info, Natasha has a degree in business management and marketing. Tony decided to play his rich boy card this time. He called the owner of that restaurant where he and Natasha met in the middle of the night and offered the guy an amount he couldn't refuse. He had a suspicion that the owner was also a spy, call it paranoia. Well, he bought that place. But here's the fun twist. What if the former owner and workers turn out to be spies? Now, with Tony as the legal owner, what if he decides to keep them around, having them run the restaurant alongside Natasha? Together, they handle the cooking and management, while Tony sits back, enjoying some side income from the operation. "I'll play with you, Natasha," he said, grinning. "Sir, Hermes," voice rang out, breaking him out of his musings. "What is it, Hermes? You really need to get some sleep, sir." "Yeah," he yawned. "I'll do just that. You know where to find me, Hermes. Let me know if something pops up." "Understood, sir." He turned the lights off, making his way to his bedroom. Meanwhile, Victor Von Doom stood in the center of his decrepit lab, sweat dripping from his brow as he stared at the sparking remnants of his failed dimensional gate. His hands, once steady with the confidence of genius, now trembled with frustration. The machine, a culmination of 2 years of work, lay in pieces before him. Its mechanisms fried, the portal generator sputtering lifelessly. "Another failure," he growled, his voice echoing through the stone chamber. So much time and resources wasted. Reed always found a way to win, even from the grave. He clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white, a sharp pain grounding him in his spiraling rage. The castle had been his only refuge after his world came crashing down. Accused of murdering Reed Richards, the man who was once his begrudging rival, Victor had been forced to flee. Disowned by his father, hunted by the authorities, and abandoned by the world he had sought to conquer, he had retreated to this ancient fortress hidden deep in the Latverian mountains. His grandfather, long dead, had left it to him in secret. It was a final gift from a man who understood the burdens of ambition. Victor paced the room, his boots crunching on shards of glass and scattered wires. The lab, though hidden beneath the castle, was equipped with stolen technology from his father's company. Hacking into their systems, which he knew like the back of his hand, and stealing resources had been child's play for a mind like his, but even with those resources the dimensional gate remained beyond his grasp. Arg! In a rage, he swept his arm across the workbench, causing tools and components to crash to the floor. His eye caught a tall mirror across the room. He froze. A sneering, mocking representation of himself met him from the mirror. He was a failure, an outcast, a desperate man. With a loud yell, he picked up a wrench and threw it at the mirror. The glass broke into sharp pieces, falling all over the stone floor. When the noise quieted down, Victor saw something strange. What the? A soft glow of light came from behind the broken mirror. For a moment, his curiosity calmed his anger. He walked up to the mirror's frame and touched its edges with his hands. There was a green crystal on the wall. Tisk! The sharp edge of the mirror cut his finger, and as he jerked his hand back, a drop of blood fell on the crystal. Suddenly, the light became brighter, and there was a soft hiss. A hidden mechanism clicked, and the wall disappeared in the thin air. What the fuck is this? Behind the wall was an old stairway lit by more green crystal. He looked down, but couldn't see the end. "What did you hide in here, Grandpa?" he mumbled before going down without a care because he had failed over and over again and had nothing to lose at this point. Outside, Mandarin and his 10 rings tracked down Victor. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 14 advanced chapters, no double billing. And I will take a little break to stockpile more chapters. 31 comments, 0 vote. Victor's origin. Victor started to walk down the stone steps, his footsteps echoing in the tight hallway. The air got colder as he went deeper, with a slight smell of dirt and old things. Green crystals on the walls gave off a strange light, lighting up the detailed carvings that twisted along the path. What are these symbols? He traced his hand along the carvings as he walked. He had never seen anything like them before. He muttered to himself, "What were you hiding, old man?" The stairs finally ended in a vast underground chamber. Victor had never seen anything like it before. The ceiling was very high, with glowing green crystals shining brightly. The walls were filled with old, mysterious symbols carved deeply into the stone. In the middle of the room, there was a big, ornate mirror. Its frame was made of blackened metal, engraved with serpents and wolves. The glass reflected the dim light, but, in that reflection, Victor felt something living in the glass, something that watched. Around the chamber were shelves carved into the walls, filled with dusty books and scrolls. A heavy wooden desk sat to one side, piled with more books and strange artifacts. On the desk, Victor's eyes fell on a red leather diary. Next to it was a faded photograph in a simple frame. The picture showed a younger man with piercing eyes and a sharp, proud face. Victor recognized the man instantly. It was his grandfather. He picked up the photograph and stared at it for a moment. He never knew his grandfather that well and barely met him twice, but for some reason, he left this place to him just before his death. Victor couldn't wait to find out the secret. He placed the photo frame down and picked up the red leather diary, his heart pounding with anticipation. The old brittle leather cover cracked as Victor opened the book. The yellow pages were filled with his grandfather's neat handwriting. The first page bore his grandfather's name, and below it, a title that sent a chill through Victor's spine: The Truth of the Von Doom Lineage. Victor sat down, his curiosity overwhelming his frustration. He began to read, his heart pounding with each word. The diary detailed his family's history, a story hidden from him his entire life. He learned that he was born to a tribe of Romani people in Latveria, ruled by a cruel nobleman known only as the Baron. His mother, Cynthia Van Dam, had been a witch of great power. She had made a dangerous pact with Mephisto, a demon who betrayed her, leading to her death when Victor was just a child. His father, Werner Van Dam, had been a skilled healer, known and respected throughout the land. After Cynthia's death, the Baron's wife fell gravely ill, and Werner was called to treat her. When his efforts failed and the woman died, the Baron accused him of murder. Werner fled with Victor, taking him far from the Baron's wrath. Victor's father had changed their surname to Von Doom, hiding their true identity to protect them both. But the secrets ran even deeper. The diary revealed that their bloodline could be traced back to Vlad Tepes Dracula himself. Victor felt a strange sense of both pride and dread as he read. He realized now why he had always felt different. If what the diary said was true, he was not just a Romani boy raised in fear of his shadowed past, but a descendant of one of the most infamous vampires in history. He closed the diary and leaned back in the chair. His mind was racing. Everything he thought he knew about himself, his family, and his past had been a lie. The failures of his life, the anger he carried, they were all pieces of a puzzle he had never been allowed to see. Now, for the first time, he saw the full picture. All those scary dreams about magic and evil spirits might actually be connected to a secret his family has been keeping from him. As someone who believes in science, it all seemed like a made-up story. But after reading his grandfather's diary, he couldn't ignore it anymore. The diary helped him understand things about himself that he never could before. Mephisto, he stood up after gathering his thoughts. How much of it is truth? I need more proof. Victor turned his attention to the large mirror in the center of the chamber. It was ornate and elegant, with a swirling black frame that seemed to have been carved from obsidian. The surface was smooth and shiny, like polished black stone. Victor touched the edge of the frame with his fingers, feeling a strange, tingling feeling on his skin. It seemed as if someone was calling to him from the other side of the glass, urging him to take the last step into a world he could never have imagined. The idea was absurd, yet as he stared into the depths of the mirror, he could almost see something moving in its reflection. Something ancient and powerful, something that had been waiting for him all this time. What is this place? He asked out loud, although there was no one else in the room to answer him. The question seemed to hang there for a moment, unanswered. Then, gradually, the glass of the mirror began to ripple, as though it were a pool of water disturbed by a pebble. The ripples spread across the glass, and in them, Victor began to see images. They were images of a place that looked like the catacombs of a castle, a place filled with dark secrets and ancient power. A thought stuck in his mind. What if magic is real? And there was no denying what he was seeing right before his eyes. What if this was his destiny from the beginning? All those failures and sufferings have led him to this point, his origin story. He knew it was impossible, but that's the whole point of science, right? To find answers to the impossible questions. Victor's heart pounded with excitement as he reached out and placed his hand against its cool surface. The glass rippled beneath his touch, and he could feel something within it reaching out to him. What? He didn't even have time to react before being sucked into the mirror. He felt as though he was going through a long, dark tunnel. A flash of light burst through, and he was in the middle of the catacombs. The cold air of the underground tomb sent shivers down his spine. Victor looked around, taking in his surroundings. The walls were lined with stone coffins, each one decorated with elaborate carvings of demons and monsters. He could feel the unnatural pressure pressing down on him as if he were stepping into a place that had been forgotten for centuries. Arg! He put his hand over his nose. The air was thick with dust and the smell of decay, making it hard to breathe. A faint green glow caught his attention. It was a book, its pages open and weathered by time, was lying on the ground. He walked over and as he touched it, he felt a strange warmth beneath his fingertips. The book glowed with an eerie green light, illuminating the catacombs. Victor picked it up and read the cover. The Book of Elements. He opened the book. It was written in a language that was foreign to him. Yet for some reason, he could understand what it said. His eyes widened when he read the first page. It was a message from his mother. The words, though written in an ancient, swirling script, flowed into his mind as if they were whispered directly into his thoughts. It was his mother's voice he heard. It was gentle, yet urgent, as though the words had been waiting for him all this time. Even his cold heart ached. My dearest Victor, if you are reading this, then you have discovered the truth of our lineage, and fate has led you to this place. Know that I loved you deeply, even if our time together was tragically short. You were but a child when I was taken, and not a day has passed in this cursed existence that I do not yearn to hold you again. I have left this book for you, a record of my life, my knowledge, and my warnings. Within these pages, you will find the spells and secrets I mastered, tools that you will need to survive the dark road ahead. Victor swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. You come from a line of strength and suffering. Our blood carries the gifts of magic and resilience, but it also bears a curse. Be wary of demons, Victor, especially one named Mephisto. He is a deceiver, a tormentor who twists the hopes of mortals into their doom. I fell victim to his promises, foolishly believing I could protect you and our people through his power. Instead, I brought ruin upon us all. The green light from the book flickered like a dying flame, and Victor's vision blurred as tears welled up in his eyes. The pact I made with him cost me my life, but not my soul. He betrayed me, as all demons do, and dragged me into the depths of hell. I am alive, Victor, though I am bound here, imprisoned by his will. If you are reading this, then I beg you, do not follow in my footsteps. Do not let anger and vengeance cloud your judgment as it did mine. There are forces in this world darker than you can imagine, and they will seek to use you for their own ends. Victor clenched his fists, rage simmering beneath his sorrow. His mother was alive, imprisoned in hell by the very demon who had orchestrated her demise. He would not let her remain there. The message continued, her voice growing more serious. This book holds my life's work. Each spell, each ritual, is a key that can unlock power beyond mortal comprehension. But power is a double-edged sword, my son. Wield it wisely, or it will consume you. Above all, remember this, you have the strength to forge your own path, to rise above the curses of our bloodline. You are not defined by the darkness that surrounds you. You are my son, and you are stronger than you know. Victor closed the book, taking a deep breath. His mind reeled with everything he had just learned. His mother was alive, imprisoned in hell. She had left this book for him, a record of her life's work, a record of spells and rituals that could unlock power beyond mortal comprehension. He knew what he had to do. He would find a way to break her out of Mephisto's grasp. He forgot about his own fame and fortune, which seemed so trivial now. The only thing that mattered was getting his mother back and killing the demon for all the pain and suffering he had caused. Leave some reviews and power stones as usual. If you like my work, you can support me on greater than www.patreon.com/excalibursk. Read over 15 advanced chapters, no double billing.